bars. Bitch Ly Doan's gaze was extremely determined. Bitch Ly Doan's sword had pierced through the bars. Yi Tian couldn't believe what was happening before his eyes. He stared with wide eyes and stammered, How? How is that possible? His eyes were now extremely determined, a gaze that could kill him instantly. Seeing that his sword had pierced halfway through, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He pointed at him and backed away. His face darkened, his eyes looking like they wanted to kill him on the spot. Seeing that the situation was not looking good, he turned to flee. Damn it, he pulled another lever. A purple smoke sprayed down from a hole in the ceiling. Then it began to fill the iron cage. He also quickly moved away from the purple smoke, saying with satisfaction, if you had just stayed put in there, you could have died a decent death. This poison is called heart acid, life-ending poison. The smoke soon enveloped the entire cage. He said excitedly, all the meridians in your body will rupture. Slowly feel the pain, and then die. But suddenly his eyes widened as if he realized something was wrong. He stared intently at the front of the cage and asked himself, what's going on? He should be screaming in agony by now, right? Why isn't there any sound at all? The door of the iron cage, along with the purple smoke, slowly tilted down. Then it crashed to the ground. That sight made Yi Tian unable to believe his eyes. He staggered back in astonishment. Bitch Ly Doan slowly stepped out of the purple smoke, to Yi Tian's horror. There didn't seem to be a single scratch on him, not even the smallest one. He asked in amazement, how did you manage to get out of there alive? He said nothing and just looked straight into his face. He waved his hands in fear and slowly backed away. I was just joking. I was just monologuing, putting on a play. Please spare my life. I'll give you all the assets in here. Hearing him say that, he let out a slight smirk. Seeing him smile, he froze. He took a deep breath, then blew the purple smoke from before towards him. The purple smoke flew straight into his face, causing him to scream in agony. No! Yi Tian clutched his face and screamed in pain. His face was now disfigured. He knelt on the ground, wailing miserably. I like to joke around too. He glanced at him and said, down there, you'd better confess all your sins honestly, just like you did earlier. The poison from the smoke had seeped into his entire body. Then Yi Tian collapsed onto the ground. At the Bitch Ly family home, Bitch Ly Doan's mother said worriedly, Huyin, Nan of the Huyin family is dead. Tianhua the Tian Dao sect is severely injured. His father was also worried and recounted to him. An expert from the Tian Dao sect also killed the master of Yishan. He bowed his head, his face full of worry. I'm really worried. I don't know what kind of storm will sweep through Shandong after this. His mother was no less concerned, her eyes filled with anxiety. I think so too. But he, on the contrary, calmly told them, I don't think there's anything to worry about. He looked up at him and asked, why is that? Bitch Ly Doan explained seriously. The Huyin family is in Jiangxi and the Tian Dao sect territory is in Guizhou. Both places are very far from here. His eyes were full of confidence in his reasoning. Anyway, what's done is done. And now that everything is clear, they don't necessarily have to come all the way to this remote Shandong to kill each other. Hearing him say that, he put a hand to his chin and thought, what you say is quite reasonable. Then he asked him again, so what do you think about the Shandong Yishang? If they still insist on revenge, won't that put Shandong in danger? He continued to voice his opinion. Yishang has always been a shady organization. They are people with bottomless greed. Why would people like that seek revenge for that Yishang? He also felt that it didn't make sense. Why would they? They'd even fight to the death among themselves to compete for territory in Shandong, wouldn't they? After hearing what Bitch Ly Doan said, the two of them felt much more at ease. He bowed his head and thought, as the Tian Dao sect's enemies increase, it also means their strength is waning. He thought of the man and mused, during this time I must strive to cultivate my strength and find out who is behind Ma Bongjiai. Then he looked up at his parents and said, I think I'll go back to Wuhan for a trip tomorrow. His mother was very surprised by his decision and asked, you're leaving already? You should rest for a while. But his father strongly approved of his intention. You're doing the right thing. The young should travel and work a lot. He gently advised him, remember to treat your subordinates well, my son. He bowed his head and obediently listened. Yes, I will remember. Something in his heart made him think. Every time we meet, father reminds me of this. He recalled his past life and thought, like today, I have many thoughts about it again. To become a capable leader, Tina Zhen in my previous life was a talented leader. He always had very close subordinates by his side. Then he thought to himself, I alone am not enough. He remembered his own happiness back then. I know that being in the highest position requires doing many things, but realistically, if it's just me, I can't realize those ambitions. He walked into the deep, dark forest. He remembered that day at Yi Tian's manor. He had burned all of his important papers. I burned all the debt notes that the master of Yishang had hidden in the secret room. Then he looked at the cloth bags and wooden boxes piled up. The amount of banknotes, there's 550,000, and with the sale of the gold items there, the money I got is 600,000. I also took all the 10,000-year cold iron from there. Then he calmly left with the money, because this is something that is hard to buy even with money. I will use this money to save good people. At the Song family manor, Song Hualin had just woken up. She stretched, her complexion incredibly fresh. That was a good sleep. Her servant, seeing this, was also happy for her. He brought in water and asked, young lady, you seem to be in a very good mood today. She smiled and replied, because I slept very well. Seeing her so happy, he also smiled in reply, that's wonderful. She looked ahead and thought to herself, it's really been a long time since I slept this well. I don't have nightmares anymore. From outside the door, a servant's voice called out, young master bitch is here to see you. Her servant heard this and showed a look of annoyance. What? She became shy, shot to her feet, and shouted, quickly tell the young master to wait for me a moment. Then Song Hualin rushed off in a flurry. flurry. The servant beside her asked, "Where are you going?" She hurriedly replied, "I'm going to take a bath, and I have to put on makeup too." Then she turned around and urged him, "You, go get my clothes. The one I love the most. Hurry up, quicken your step." In a flash, she zoomed out the door. Her servant was also surprised. The young lady even used her lightness skill. At the Song family manor, bitch Ly Don was standing and waiting outside. His expression was very pensive. Hearing a sound, he was startled and turned around. She was dressed in a gorgeous gown. She shyly stepped out and asked him, "I wonder why the young master has come so early?" Seeing her like this, he was a bit flustered. "I'm sorry, did I come too early?" She pretended to be sleepy and said to him, "I just woke up. I haven't even had a chance to wash up." Looking at her current appearance, he felt very surprised. Really? He looked her up and down and thought, yet her clothes are neat and her face is radiant. The atmosphere between the two suddenly became very awkward. Neither said a word to the other. Song Hualin shyly tucked her hair back and asked him, "What business does the young master have to come here so early?" He looked down and said to her, "I have to go to Wuhan for a trip. It will probably take 1 to 2 months, so I came here to say goodbye to you, young lady." Hearing this news, she was also a little surprised, but then she lowered her head and smiled. "So that's it." She clutched her sleeve tightly to hide her worry. Then she said softly, "Thank you so much for what you did this time, young master bitch, really." She looked up at him, her cheeks already flushed red. "Have a safe trip, young master." Hearing her words, bitch Ly Don nodded. Then he smiled faintly and said to her, "Before I go, I want to fulfill the promise I made to you, young lady." She opened her eyes wide, looked at him, and asked again, "A promise?" He turned to her and said, "I promise to teach you a more powerful martial art." Hearing him say that, she felt even more surprised. Bitch Ly Don and Song Hualin sat together in the martial arts training yard. He said, "The martial art I want to teach you is called Jinhua, sword technique." He taught her the breathing and internal energy circulation of this martial art. This is the unique martial art of Lady Gu Xinhua, a female master from a past life. The sword technique she learned from Huyan Nan before has no chance against this kind of sword technique. He thought to himself, "First, I taught the mind-heart technique to Song Hualin. She sat below, trying to calm her mind and circulate her internal energy. Then I taught her the sword techniques." Bitch Ly Don demonstrated each movement one by one, and Song Hualin stood outside, watching his every move intently. I have read out the most crucial parts to be able to teach her this martial art in the fastest and most accurate way. Then he would explain it to her in detail again, and then she would practice according to his instructions. He said in a stern voice, "Focus." Bitch Ly Don watched her every move and said, "Your internal energy flow is unstable, young lady." Song Hualin practiced very seriously. She tried to follow exactly what he had taught. The two of them practiced together from when the sky was still bright until dusk. After practicing, she was panting from exhaustion. He stood beside her, looked at her, and gently advised, "I will give you more guidance when I return. Until then, you just need to practice what you learned today, young lady." She looked at him and smiled faintly. "I will definitely practice diligently." Seeing her like that, he also felt very satisfied. He said gently, "When you master martial art, you must be free. And we can only be free when we're not bound by anything." He did not forget to remind her, "But you must never forget, young lady. A person can reach a state of freedom in martial arts practice." He said to her seriously, "Is someone who has repeated a single move hundreds, thousands of times, and only such people can have freedom." She smiled happily when she heard him speak. "Yes, I will remember." Looking at her determined appearance, he thought to himself, this is not just a story about learning martial arts. In life, it's the same. Freedom created from perseverance and patience is true freedom. After advising her, he turned to leave. "Well, I will take my leave." Then he suddenly saw something that surprised him. Song Hualin reached her hand out to him. She extended her hand towards him and smiled. She said softly, "The next time we meet, I will be stronger." He also smiled and replied to her, "I'm looking forward to it." The two of them clasped hands tightly, and a pact was made between them. She looked up at him with a very determined gaze. Bitch Ly Don looked at her with a gentle gaze. In Wuhan, people were walking on a very crowded and bustling street. Bitch Ly Don was walking on the street when a voice from behind startled him, making him turn his head. Young master, Guang Tu, from out of nowhere, rushed to hug him tightly. "I missed you so much, young master." Seeing his behavior, he smiled and joked, "This guy, anyone who sees this would think we're a family separated for decades, finally reunited." It took a while for him to let go. He said to him, "I did it on purpose. I heard there was trouble in Shandong, and I was very worried." Then he glanced at him and asked, "Could it be that you did it, young master?" He just smiled without saying anything. Seeing his attitude, he seemed to understand what had happened. He shouted, "Oh my God." He smiled and continued, "There's nothing to worry about. I've handled it all properly." Worry and fear were clearly visible on his face. Hearing him say that, he didn't say anything more. Then he lowered his head and said in a small voice, "Weren't you scared, young master? If I had to deal with people like that, I probably would have died of a heart attack." Seeing his attitude, he smiled faintly. Then he looked forward again and said seriously, "I was scared." But suddenly, bitch Ly Don turned to look at Guang Tu and said, "Won't someone else kill for me?" He was suspicious and asked him back, "Is there such a person?" Seeing him keep looking at him, he also felt confused. Then, as if he suddenly realized something, he jumped in surprise and asked him again, "Is it me?" He just replied nonchalantly, "Yes." After hearing him, he turned his face away, his face now pale. "Don't forget, young master, fair, my sword hand is still very weak. To become strong, it would probably take a few hundred more years. Seeing his fearful appearance, he couldn't help but chuckle. Then Guang Tu sauntered away. At that moment, a voice rang in his ear. You're back, young master. He looked at Kong Chu-san and said softly, yes, I'm back. Then his eyes suddenly showed a worried look. He looked at him and asked, you don't look well. Kong Chu-san's eyes were dark and sunken, his face haggard as if from lack of sleep. Bitch Ly Don said seriously, you have to get enough rest even when you're working. He smiled and said, I'm still eating well, sleeping well, and working hard. Seeing that he was still very persistent, he sighed and said, this is an order. Only then did he gently close his eyes and bow his head, yes. Then he spoke again, young master bitch, this subordinate wishes to go somewhere with you. His words made him feel a bit curious. The two of them went to a large manor inside a forest. Seeing the manor, he couldn't help but be astonished. His eyes widened as he stared at the vast estate. Kong Chu-san looked up at the manor and said, this is the manor your subordinate has just purchased. This place will become the headquarters of a new merchant guild. He looked around and continued, although it is just a small, insignificant achievement, your subordinate truly wanted the young master to be the first to see it. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back and said, how can you call this small and insignificant? It is at this very place that we will write history. This place will be the beginning of a legend that people will speak of. Then Kong Chu-san gently opened the door, bowed his head, and said, thank you for your praise, young master. Bitch Ly Don slowly stepped inside. The manor's interior was incredibly spacious. He glanced over at him and said, you have worked hard. He humbly and gently said, not at all. This subordinate only bought a house with the money the young master gave me. Hearing him say that, he immediately turned his head and said in a stern voice, that wasn't my money alone, it was our money. Seeing him say this, Kong Chu-san froze on the spot. He didn't know what to say. Then he bowed and said softly, yes, young master. He continued, young master, please give the merchant guild a name. But Bitch Ly Don immediately refused, no? Haven't I already given General Manager Kong full authority to decide on this matter? General Manager Kong, you should name the merchant guild. Seeing him assign the task like that, he raised a hand to his chin and thought. Then what does the young master think of the name Tai Tin Merchant Association? He felt extremely surprised by that name. The Tai Tin Merchant Association? He continued to explain the meaning of the name to him. This name means that although it is just a small merchant association now, it will later become a great star that illuminates the entire world. Bitch Ly Don felt very satisfied with his answer. Good, let's go with that name. Hearing him say that, he also felt happy inside. The two of them just stood there and admired the manor they had acquired. The houses, which looked very similar, were built close to each other. Bitch Ly Don sat by the window and looked outside. He thought to himself, even though we have a manor, I'm still staying at the inn. He picked up his wine cup and thought, I stopped by because this is the Merchant Association's first day, but for now, I want to nurture this association into an organization with no connection to the bitch family sword sect. Thinking this, he smiled faintly. Kong Chu-san also won't appear directly, but will only operate from behind scenes. Just then, a voice from behind rang out, startling him and making him turn around. My lord. Bao Bao stepped inside and clasped his hands to greet him. You're back. Seeing him, he broke into a smile. I'm back. Besides Bao Bao, he had also brought two other people. When the two of them saw him, they couldn't help but be surprised. Is it this person? He looked at the two of them with a puzzled expression. Then Bao Bao began to introduce the two of them to him. This subordinate would like to introduce these two people to my lord. He turned to the two behind him and said, hurry and greet him. This is my lord. The man in the green robe clasped his hands. This junior is Jun Tan. The other did the same. This junior is Min Dao. He looked at the two of them with an expression of great trust. These were all my subordinates back in the fierce tiger troop. He looked at the two of them and smiled faintly. If the white martial artist trusts them, then so will I. From now on, let's work together and get to know each other better. Seeing his action, both of them were extremely surprised. Then the two of them clasped their hands, bowed their heads, and said, yes. Bitch Ly Don looked at Bao Bao and smiled. He thought to himself, Bao Bao did well. In the current situation, what I need most is talent. Bao Bao's demeanor towards the two of them was extremely confident, especially since they were trustworthy people. No matter how much money I have, or how many martial artists I can recruit. He looked at him, then smiled with satisfaction. If I can't attract reliable and talented people, then numbers are just numbers. Bitch Ly Don handed the letter to Bao Bao and picked up his wine cup, thinking Bao Bao must miss his wife and son very much. As he read the contents of the letter, he was utterly astonished, his eyes as if not believing what he had just read. My lord's parents are treating my wife and son like their own family? Seeing his somewhat surprised expression, he couldn't help but ask, what is it? The lady didn't scold me? Bao Bao immediately looked up at him and explained at once. Not at all. How could that be? Bitch Ly Don smiled faintly. Then he reached into his robe and took something out. He placed a cloth pouch on the table and pushed it towards him. Take this. Bao Bao looked at the cloth pouch, not understanding what he meant. He picked up the cloth pouch with a rather worried expression. He looked at the pouch and said nothing. Seeing him silent, he continued, it's 300,000 taels. His words made him utterly surprised. He looked up at him with a completely baffled expression. Bao Bao clutched the money pouch in his hand and lowered his head, asking Bitch Ly Don doubtfully, why would my lord give this subordinate such a large sum of money? Bitch Ly Don looked at him, his eyes showing a determined look, and he said, use this money to establish an elite sword squad for me. Hearing him say that, he became even more confused and asked again, an elite sword squad? He lowered his head and gently picked up picked up his wine cup. That's right. The number doesn't matter. 10 is fine, and 100 is fine. His eyes at this moment were incredibly determined. He looked straight at Bao Bao and said, "What I need is a powerful organization that can unconditionally carry out any given order." Hearing him say that, Bao Bao smiled faintly. He clasped his hands and accepted his command. "Yes, my lord can leave this matter to this subordinate." Seeing him say that, he smiled, satisfied with the answer. Then Bitch Lai Don took out a sword and placed it on the table. "Take it." He took the sword from his hand, again showing a puzzled expression. Before he could ask, he immediately answered his unspoken question. "This is a gift for you. From now on, you will be the master of this sword." But his expression became even more confused. He held the sword tightly and asked him again, "But this is the sword my lord used before." Bitch Lai Don's gaze towards him was incredibly gentle. He said softly, "Thanks to you, I have obtained a better sword." Hearing him say that, he immediately lowered his head. A worried look was evident on his face. He looked at the sword in his hand and asked him worriedly, "May this subordinate try to draw this sword once, please?" Without hesitation, he nodded in agreement. Bao Bao gently took hold of the sword. When he drew the sword, a stream of light emanated from within it. It glowed strangely. He seemed unable to hide his emotions. His eyes glistened. Bitch Lai Don also felt quite satisfied with his expression. He stared at the glowing sword and said, "It's a famed sword." He held the sword upright and gently touched it. He observed it for a long time, then hesitantly said, "But it seems this subordinate has seen it somewhere before." He lowered his face and drank from the cup in his hand. He told him, "Famed swords naturally give those who hold them a similar feeling." He recalled his past life when he still used that sword. "I only used the heaven-forged sword for a few months, and that was a very long time ago." He observed Bao Bao's expression and thought to himself, "I even reforged it. There's no way Bao Bao could recognize it now." At this moment, there was something strange in his eyes. He gently sheathed the sword, then offered it back to him. This subordinate cannot accept such a precious sword. Seeing this action of his, he couldn't help but be surprised. But he immediately explained the reason he gave him the sword. "As the head of a supreme organization, you should at least have a sword like this." Bao Bao's eyes widened as he looked at him and said loudly, "Young master." He looked down at the sword on the bed and hesitantly said, "This sword is indeed very precious, but," he said gently, "not as precious as you." Hearing him say that, he was immediately moved to silence by his words. Bitch Lai Don looked at him and said frankly, "To be honest, this isn't a gift so much as it is a shackle. A shackle so that you can never leave me." At this point, he frowned slightly. "I've already gone this far, and you still won't accept it?" Hearing him say this, he remained silent. His eyes sank slightly. He said in a low voice, "This subordinate is grateful." Then he picked up the sword, clasped his hands, and said loudly to Bitch Lai Don, "The shackle bestowed by my lord." Seeing his attitude, he was extremely satisfied. He also looked at him with an incredibly determined and trusting gaze. The sun gradually set below the towering mountain peaks. Kuang Dao sat opposite him and said reproachfully, "Does the young master have nothing for this subordinate?" He picked up his wine cup and said nonchalantly, "Of course I do." Hearing him say that, he felt happier than ever and joyfully asked him, "I knew it. What is it this time?" "Spirit medicine." His eyes suddenly turned sly. He smiled and said, "It's something even better than spirit medicine." Hearing Bitch Lai Don say that, he felt more excited than ever and shouted, "Could it be the inner core of a spirit beast?" He looked at him and said gently, "Even more precious than that." Then he picked up the wine jug and offered it towards Guangdou. This action of his made him freeze. Bitch Lai Don chuckled and said, "Have a drink with me?" After hearing him say that, he immediately froze. He didn't know what to say to him at this moment. He let out a sigh and said sulkily, "Everyone else gets money, swords, and trust, yet this subordinate only gets wine." Seeing that he seemed to be blaming him, he closed his eyes and sighed. He raised his wine cup, took a big gulp, and said gently, "That's because everything that could be given, I've already given you." His words moved Kuang Dao more than ever. His cheeks flushed red. He shrugged and said to him, "I know, the young master is not a stingy person." Then he offered the wine jug towards him again, saying loudly, "Come on, take it." Kuang Dao didn't refuse at all and immediately picked up his cup. "I'll take it. I'll take it. This is more precious than spirit medicine after all." Bitch Lai Don slowly poured wine into his cup. Kuang Dao also stood up and poured more wine into Bitch Lai Don's cup. "Young master, you have a drink too." He looked at him with a gentle gaze, raised his cup, and said softly, "All right." Seeing him like this, he was also very happy, smiling nonstop. Then the two of them raised their cups together. Both were extremely happy. At the Ho Dain family estate, a group of people were standing inside the room, with one man kneeling as if he had committed some crime. The one sitting on a main chair was the head of the Ho Dain family, Ho Dain. He looked down at the man and asked in a stern voice, "What is the meaning of all this?" Ho Dain Trak, kneeling on the ground with his head bowed low, became even more frightened upon hearing his voice. He squeezed his eyes shut and said loudly, "This subordinate doesn't know either." Master suddenly drew his sword and attacked Kim Hoa. His eyes blazed and he roared, "Bastard, stop talking nonsense." His shout seemed about to blow away everyone below. Frightened, he bowed his head and tried to explain. This subordinate has no reason to dare speak so recklessly. Seeing his appearance, Ho Dain returned to normal. He asked again in a stern voice, "Did Ho Dain really attack first?" He squeezed his eyes shut, his voice slightly fearful. "That is correct. Please believe this subordinate, family head." Hearing Ho Dain Trak's words, he thought to himself, "When I first heard the news, I thought it was false information, but if this is true, then this is a big problem." Kim Hoa, the murderous disciple of the Heavenly Blade sect, is known for his sky-high pride and filthy nature. He won't let this matter go easily. Then he shouted, "Dismissed. Go reflect on your actions." The others obediently followed. Yes. Seeing the Ho Dain Trak was still kneeling, He was surprised and asked, "Do you have something else to say?" He said in a low voice, "This subordinate has another matter to report to the family head." He stared at him and asked, "What is it?" His face darkened. "The thing is..." Then he recounted the events of that day. Jia Thien had given Ho Dainam a cloth pouch full of money. Jia Thuong had previously sought out Master and privately gave him 10,000 taels. Hearing him say this, he asked in a stern voice, "He took money privately?" And he continued to recount where he saw Ho Dainam go that night. Yes, this subordinate personally saw Master receive that money and then step outside. Hearing this, he became extremely angry. If this is true, then he took money from Jia Thuong and attacked Kim Hoa. What will become of our Ho Dain family's reputation? Now, the man beside Ho Dain then spoke up and asked him, "Do the other disciples know about this?" He kept his head bowed and said, "No, only this subordinate knows." Ho Dain sternly reminded him, "From now on, you're absolutely forbidden from ever mentioning this matter again." He also obediently listened without a single word of argument. This subordinate will remember. Then Ho Dain tracked it up and went outside. He was furious and couldn't stop cursing Ho Dain Nam. "That damn bastard. I should have realized it when he insisted on handling this matter." He put a hand to his head and said to the man beside him, "We must meet with them to sort this out." The man's expression did not change in the slightest, and he immediately obeyed. Yes, this subordinate will go make contact right away. He continued, "Proceed." The man looked at Ho Dain track and asked, "What about that child?" The man said softly, "If the matter of him taking a bribe gets out, wouldn't it cause a huge problem?" He stared at him and said sternly, "We can't let that happen." Before them were towering, overlapping mountain ranges, shrouded in drifting white clouds. On a clearing, Bitch Lai Don sat cross-legged with a straight back, cultivating. He relaxed his body, his eyes shut tight. Bitch Lai Don pressed his lips together, his brows gradually furrowing. The space around him turned dark, and he was led into an illusion. As soon as he opened his eyes, Bitch Lai Don keenly caught a movement in the distance. A purple aura radiated from his body as he turned his head to look. The figure of a person full of killing intent was approaching. He quickly recognized him, the leader of the Blood Heaven Divine Sect. Seeing the killing intent mixed with red energy gradually spreading throughout the space, Bitch Lai Don was a little apprehensive. He is the strongest among all the people I have ever fought. He reacted very quickly, spinning around. The spiritual energy around him began to gather. I used the secret art of Zen cultivation to deal with him. With enough spiritual energy, Bitch Lai Don decisively waved his hand, preparing to charge into battle. The spiritual energy shot forward, causing the space before him to suddenly explode. Taking advantage of the moment, the leader of the Blood Heaven Divine Sect was caught off guard. Bitch Lai Don seized the opportunity to rush towards him. The eyes of the Blood Heaven Divine Sect's leader flashed. He decisively swung his hand forward. The dense killing intent gathered, and with a single move, it blew away the spiritual energy that had just been launched. Bitch Lai Don stood his ground amidst the countless scattered rock fragments. He frowned, clenching his teeth tightly. Veins had popped out on his hand. Spiritual energy gathered as he clenched his hand into a fist. The leader of the Blood Heaven Divine Sect before him was still frantically unleashing his power. On his side, Bitch Lai Don was prepared to throw his punch. A thick current of white energy swept across the ground, kicking up clouds of dust. Blood trickled down from the top of his head as Bitch Lai Don struggled to look up. He only saw the leader of the Blood Heaven Divine Sect, with an emotionless face, swing his hand to strike again. He continuously slammed his fist into the ground, the killing intent converging and causing explosions all around. Bitch Lai Don nimbly spun and dodged again. He seized the opportunity, following the momentum to swing his leg and kick straight at his opponent. Bitch Lai Don somersaulted, perfectly landing a kick on the shoulder of the leader of the Blood Heaven Divine Sect. He was momentarily caught off guard, his whole body freezing, his face darkening. Immediately after, a powerful killing intent erupted around him, blowing away everything in the vicinity. The leader of the Blood Heaven Divine Sect bent over slightly as the killing intent gradually dissipated. The whites of Bitch Lai Don's eyes showed, his face contorted as he lay motionless. Returning to reality, cold sweat trickled down his face. Bitch Lai Don frowned in discomfort. He returned to the illusion once more. His sharp eyes very quickly detected movement. This time, the leader of the Blood Heaven Divine Sect appeared without the same killing intent as before. Another loud explosion erupted in the space. The leader of the Blood Heaven Divine Sect quickly dashed past Bitch Lai Don. Half of his body was instantly disintegrated, his face still showing a look of terror. Bitch Lai Don's face was covered in blood, his eyes wide open, pupils constricting repeatedly. Returning to reality, this time Bitch Lai Don's face was even more strained. Sweat poured down in waves as he gritted his teeth and endured. I'm still no match for that sect leader, but if I can master the secret art of Zen cultivation, could I kill him? Returning to the illusion again, he stood before the leader of the Blood Heaven Divine Sect. The thought still lingered in his mind. There's no way to know for sure. Holding the sword in his hand, Bitch Lai Don decisively advanced. This time, I will try to combine both the soul-chasing Azura sword technique and the secret art of Zen cultivation. The colossal, dark shadow of the Blood Heaven Divine Sect's leader still loomed above. Bitch Lai Don held his sword tightly, preparing to strike with surging spiritual energy. He frowned, a glint in his eyes, and charged forward with his sharp sword, finally letting out a sigh of relief. Bitch Lai Don told himself, as expected, using two types of martial arts at the same time to deal with a peerless expert is an incredibly childish thing to do. Slowly taking a deep breath, he returned to his initial initial state of cultivation. But I will not give up. With that thought, he opened his eyes, his sharp gaze and determined expression looking forward. If I can harmoniously fuse these two martial arts, I will surely find a way. In the distance were towering, overlapping mountain ranges. In the city, large, multi-story buildings were built close to one another. In a small inn, people sat chatting, eating, and drinking. Kwang Dao held a bowl of wine in his hands and drank it all in one go. He put down the bowl, wiped away the remaining bit of wine with his hand, and exclaimed, "Truly, there is nothing in this world more satisfying than having a bowl of wine after cultivating." Bitch Lai Don't agreed. Exactly. With that thought, he also raised his bowl and drank it all in one go. Looking at the wine bowl in his hand, Bitch Lai Don's expression gradually relaxed. He thought to himself, especially when drinking with a close friend, there is nothing more joyful. Suddenly, a conversation nearby caught Bitch Lai Don's attention. Have you heard news? A man walked in from outside, speaking loudly as he went. The disciple of Ho Dain Nam, the one who was recently killed by Kim Hoa, has committed suicide. Remembering Ho Dain Trak's face, Bitch Lai Don felt a bit puzzled. Ho Dain Nam's disciple? Kwang Dao looked over with some concern and saw the next table buzzing with discussion. One person asked loudly, "You mean Ho Dain Trak?" The other man immediately replied, "That's right. He ended his own life out of guilt for not being able to protect his master." Bitch Lai Don frowned and listened intently, remaining silent. Recalling the image of Ho Dain Trak with his scratched face, determinedly holding his sword to strike, he couldn't help but wonder. He didn't seem that weak. It's possible he would feel guilty, but not to the point of suicide. Thinking this, Bitch Lai Don's eyes immediately darkened. Could it be? The man who provided the information earlier suddenly rubbed his chin and mumbled, "Such a waste of a youth in his prime." The person at the next table heard this and added, "It seems he was a man who greatly respected his master." Another person from afar chimed in, as expected of a disciple from a righteous and prestigious sect. The chatter continued in the distance. Kwang Dao, having heard the gist of the information, turned back to the table with a sympathetic expression. What a sad story. Bitch Lai Don lowered his head slightly, unable to stop himself from asking out loud, "Did he really commit suicide?" Hearing this, Kwang Dao immediately became flustered. What? Is there any reason he wouldn't have? Bitch Lai Don frowned and didn't answer, looking straight at him with a serious expression. Kwang Dao was immediately startled and couldn't help but exclaim, "Why are you making such a scary face, young master?" Bitch Lai Don remained silent, picking up his wine bowl and taking a sip. As he set the bowl down, his eyes were somewhat contemplative. I have witnessed many things like this. The more he thought, the darker his eyes became, and his brows furrowed tightly. Under the guise of protecting their family's name, many people have done depraved and corrupt things. He picked up the wine jug to pour into his bowl, and after some thought, he suddenly said, "That's right, it might not be true." Before Kwang Dao could understand, he heard Bitch Lai Don add from across the table, but it could also be true. Finally, he looked straight into his eyes and concluded seriously, "Because we don't know what the truth is, and this is precisely why we learn martial arts." Kwang Dao's expression also became serious. He couldn't help but ask again, "Why? What does this have to do with us learning martial arts?" Bitch Lai Don sat up straight and explained in an even tone, "Because only the strong can know the truth. The truth of the weak will forever remain a question." Mark. Kwang Dao's face seemed to light up, his eyes wide as he listened intently. It took a moment for him to react, then he quickly replied, "Yes, this subordinate will definitely train diligently." His hand on the table gently touched the wine bowl. Bitch Lai Don's mind was racing. If the Ho Dain family killed him and faked it as a suicide then. Thinking this, he couldn't help but press his lips together tightly, trying to suppress the anger in his heart. They have truly crossed the line. The sky was dark, and outside the Alliance leader's hall was a stretch of silence. In the room, Tu Kim Hoa had one arm in a cast. His tone was annoyed. "If we just let this go, my heavenly blade sect will be ridiculed by the people of the martial world." Ma Bong sat on a high chair with Sima Tian beside him. Hearing this, he narrowed his eyes and asked, "Didn't you already kill Huyen Nan?" Regaining his composure, Zi Qianhua immediately replied, "That's still not enough." Ma Bong let him continue. "If that's the case then." Zi Qianhua looked straight ahead, his tone resolute as he said, "I must kill all of those who were present there on that day. Only then will no one dare to look down on our sect like this again." After he finished speaking, Sima Tian, who was above, couldn't help but tilt his head, trying to suppress a laugh. Seeing this, Zi Qianhua glared at him, thinking resentfully, "Sima Tian, do you trust the Alliance leader that much? To the point of treating us like a joke." In contrast, Ma Bong seemed rather unconcerned. He was silent for a long while before suddenly saying, "For now, you may withdraw." Zi Qianhua didn't say more, bowed his head, and quickly complied. This subordinate obeys. As he was leaving, Sima Tian, standing beside, spoke up. He failed to complete the assigned mission, yet not only does he not feel any remorse, but he also dares to act so disrespectfully. Ma Bong let out a soft laugh and continued, "He's just upset right now. In a few days, everything will be back to normal." Sima Tian narrowed his eyes in confusion and mumbled, "Why on earth does the Alliance leader trust him so much?" Ma Bong smirked, his gaze fixed forward, and said slowly, "He has strength, and he doesn't have any deep thoughts." Hearing this, Sima Tian turned to him doubtfully. "Sir?" Ma Bong sat up straight, a knowing smile on his face as he explained, "In this martial world, people like him are rare. Usually, those with strength also have quick minds." Then he tilted his head and glanced at Sima Tian. "You, on the other hand, think too much." Suddenly being mentioned, his face immediately stiffened, and he looked back with a puzzled expression. Ma Bong slowly stood up and continued, "If it were you, you would surely like such a subordinate as well. Who wouldn't want their subordinate to follow orders unconditionally without any thoughts of their own? Upon hearing this, Sima Tian's face twisted slightly. Immediately after, he chuckled and replied in a sarcastic tone, I, of course, prefer to have subordinates who are like myself. Mindless fools who only know how to follow orders can be found anywhere. Ma Bong stood up and clasped his hands behind his back. He threw his head back and laughed loudly. You have to use your head to keep everything in the palm of your hand. I chose you as well. Just as he turned to leave, Sima Tian behind him, as if remembering something, suddenly said, the public opinion in the martial world is not good at all. We need to handle this matter as quickly as possible. Ma Bong didn't look back, thought for a moment, then replied, I know. Sima Tian, behind him, watched Ma Bong's retreating figure with a somewhat pensive look. Seeing him walk away, Sima Tian slowly bowed. As the figure gradually disappeared from sight, Sima Tian's gaze still followed, and he thought to himself, Ma Bong has changed a lot after becoming the alliance leader. Looking at Ma Bong's steady back, he couldn't help but feel a hint of regret. I can't feel any of his former simplicity in him anymore. At night, at the first Wuhan Inn, in the main hall, a person was sitting on a high platform. There were guards on both sides, and in front were countless people crowding around to watch. The surrounding atmosphere was extremely noisy and lively. Zi Qianhua, on his chair, slowly savored his wine, ignoring the whispers around him. That person is the butcher Zi Qianhua. I heard he killed Huyin Nan with a single punch. Before the eyes of everyone, he picked up his wine cup and drained it in one gulp. After finishing his drink, Zi Qianhua turned his head and gave a look to his subordinate in the distance. Yi Wu, receiving the order, stepped forward, reaching into his inner pocket to take something out. A moment later, he threw countless coins into the air, shouting loudly, Great Hero Qian has a small gift for all the honored guests present here today. The crowd, upon seeing the money, immediately roared, everyone scrambling to pick up the coins that fell to the ground. Through the crowd, in a small corner, the figure of Bai Leiden could be seen. He held a cup in his hand, his eyes thoughtfully gazing at the crowd, thinking to himself, gathering so many people for binge drinking and even throwing money around like trash. Suddenly, his eyes caught something and stopped. A young lady with an indifferent expression sat not far away, her gaze directed elsewhere. Seeing her, he was momentarily startled. Number 7. Recalling her previous appearance in disguise and her expression, Bai Leiden couldn't help but feel a bit nostalgic. I never thought I would meet her again in a situation like this. While he was lost in his thoughts, a shout suddenly echoed from afar, startling him and making him turn. You, aren't you afraid of heavenly punishment? Zi Qianhua, holding a wine cup he hadn't yet brought to his lips, heard the loud shout and also rolled his eyes to look. Standing before him was an old woman leaning on a cane, followed by a young lady. Both were wearing the white robes of their sect. Seeing this, Bai Leiden couldn't help but turn to look a little longer. I think I've seen this person somewhere before. The crowd in the distance, seeing this, simultaneously parted to both sides, making way for the grandmother and granddaughter to come forward. The two reached the empty space in the center, at which point Yi Wu stepped down from the high platform, asking in an authoritative tone, who dares to speak so recklessly in this place? The old woman, seeing this, hurriedly spoke up, I am Anyang. Huyan Zhe, my grandson, died because of you. As soon as they heard this name, Zi Qianhua, Yi Wu, and everyone else present were startled and looked over. Bai Leiden was also taken aback. He frowned slightly, a drop of cold sweat trickling down his cheek. Anyang, I've definitely seen this face somewhere before. The memories gradually flooded back, an image of a little girl and a grown man. In my childhood, I lived in a small village, and I met this child there. That child always tagged along behind me, constantly calling me big brother. Then one day, that child came to me, blushing shyly, and even said that when she grew up, she would take me as her husband. To someone like me, who was crazy about the martial world, Anyang back then was just a naive child. That child eventually grew up. After becoming a young woman, Anyang no longer paid any attention to me. Just like that, the figure of the young woman stepped into a bridal sedan with her husband. I later heard news that she had married a descendant of the Huyin family when he passed through the village. Looking at the old face with wrinkles etched by time, and remembering the smiling face of Huyin Zhe, Bai Leiden finally remembered. It turned out Huyin Zhe was her grandson. On the other side, after hearing Anyang's introduction, Yi Wu, after recovering, was on the contrary unconcerned. He even asked in a mocking tone, I heard he committed suicide because he couldn't protect his master, right? Is this old lady the grandmother of that weakling? Or something? As soon as he finished speaking, Anyang swung her cane to strike, shouting, Bastard, my Zayer is not the kind of child who would commit suicide over something like that. Unfortunately, the cane didn't hit Yi Wu. He easily dodged it. Not only that, but Yi Wu also swung his hand and gave Anyang a hard push. She couldn't react in time, was suddenly pushed hard, lost her balance, and fell, but someone quickly came from behind to support her. Turning her head to look, Anyang met Bai Leiden's sharp, cold gaze directed at Zi Qianhua's group. Then he turned back and smiled. Seeing this, she slowly stood up and said with a smile, Young man, thank you. Hearing this, Bai Leiden's gaze couldn't help but soften, and he thought to himself, seeing her up close like this, her face still retains many features from her childhood. Looking at Anyang's wrinkled face, Bai Leiden's heart suddenly became nostalgic. The naive child from back then is now this old. Thinking this, he bowed slightly, and after making sure Anyang was standing steadily, he smiled and replied, It was nothing. Yi Wu, standing in the distance, seemed uncomfortable at the sight and muttered, What kind of creature is that guy now? Hearing this, Bai Leiden stood up straight, turned his head, and replied coolly, I just came to enjoy the scenery. Yi Wu feigned confusion, a smirk playing on his lips as he asked, Then just keep enjoying the scenery. Why don't you? What's the reason for rudely interfering interfering in the affairs of adults. Hearing this, Bailaden paid it no mind and retorted, was I being rude? On the contrary, I think the way you talk to an elder is completely out of line. As soon as he finished speaking, loud bursts of laughter immediately erupted from all around. Seeing Iwu turn towards them, the crowd simultaneously shut their mouths and bowed their heads. On the high platform, Zi Qianhua finally couldn't hold back and slammed his fist hard on the table. His face darkened, his thick eyebrows knitted together, and he gritted his teeth, growling in anger. Has my territory gotten this filthy? Lately, the table was smashed to pieces by the force of the blow. After venting his anger, Zi Qianhua simply turned around and went inside. A moment of silence passed, and now only Bailaden and Iwu were left, staring at each other. Finally, he glared and left a warning in a low voice. A lot of people are watching, and yet you have no sense at all. You will soon regret this. With that, Iwu and his disciples decisively turned and left. Bailaden said nothing. He squinted as he watched the group leave, thinking to himself, Ma Bong has changed a lot after becoming the alliance leader. The butcher Zi Qianhua is someone who cares a lot about his reputation, so he deliberately avoided the scene and went elsewhere. As expected, he is very concerned with how others see him. The girl accompanying my Nyang now stepped forward and said softly, "Thank you for your help, young master. My name is Huyin Shuzhen." Hearing this, Bailaden also introduced himself. I am Bailaden. Huyin Shuzhen quickly continued, "I will never forget young Master Bai's help today." Bailaden bowed his head, replying with a relaxed expression, "It was nothing." Hearing this, my Nyang happily approached. "Young man, thank you." He tilted his head and smiled at her. Finally, he gently advised, "Old madam, please be careful on your way." Just like that, Bailaden stood silently, watching the figures of my Nyang and Huyin Shuzhen as they left. There was a hint of reluctance in his eyes. In the end, he remained silent, thinking to himself, it seems she came to the Martial Arts Alliance to clarify that Huyin Zhe's death was not a suicide. But is that even possible in a martial arts alliance where Ma Bong is the leader? The sky grew darker as night fell. Outside the inn, it became increasingly deserted. Darkness enveloped the space. Bailaden walked alone on the path leading deep into the forest, lost in thought. After that commotion, I couldn't find any trace of number 7. Why would number 7 be following Zi Qianhua? After walking for a while, a clearing deep in the forest appeared before him. His steps slowly came to a halt. Glancing into the distance, Bailaden suddenly said in a cold voice, "You can come out now." From behind a large tree, Iwu slowly stepped out, not forgetting to exclaim, "Pretty good senses." Bailaden paid him no mind, only asking, "You were following me?" Iwu admitted it very naturally. That's right. "I told you I'd make you regret it." Bailaden clasped his hands behind his back. He slowly turned around. "Aren't you in a bit of a hurry? Following me all the way out here already?" Iwu also spoke bluntly. "I have never been slow when it comes to killing people." Hearing these words, Bailaden put on a bewildered expression. He let out a soft laugh and asked, "You're going to kill me? Why?" Iwu's voice immediately deepened, his face showing a hint of anger as he said, "You dared to embarrass me in front of so many people. I have never spared anyone who dared to insult me." The two stood a distance apart. In the dark night, Bailaden's voice echoed, "Oh, how did I insult you?" Iwu gripped the hilt of his sword, finally unable to hold back, not knowing your place, and stepping forward to run your mouth. "You truly are an ignorant fool." Bailaden finally stopped pretending. He asked directly, "Is that all? For such a childish reason, you're determined to take a life?" Iwu smirked, his hand already drawing the sword from its sheath. "What more reason is needed?" Bailaden's face immediately darkened. A cold glint flashed in the depths of his eyes. He let out a breath. He's the kind of person who will kill someone just because they made him unhappy. Even if his crimes were exposed, he has the heavenly blade sect to back him up and would easily escape punishment. Seeing him silent, Iwu in front of him twirled his sword a few times. His voice couldn't help but sound smug. "What's wrong? Scared? Speechless? That's why I say, if you want to pick a fight, you have to see who your opponent is first." Bailaden's feet had remained still all this time. He didn't move. After a moment of silence, he suddenly said, "Someone who kills for a reason like that." Half of his face was shrouded in darkness, his eyes flashing with a ruthless glint. A knowing smile played on his lips as he enunciated each word clearly. "Deserves to die. Say goodbye to this world." Iwu's brow furrowed. He tilted his head in some confusion. "What are you barking about?" In contrast, Bailaden paid no attention to this remark. He bared his teeth in a grin, and no matter what, you should at least leave some last words for this world, shouldn't you? Hearing these words, Iwu couldn't help but laugh out loud. "You're insane." Bailaden closed his eyes and smiled. He remained silent. Finally losing his patience, Iwu's face darkened. He raised his sword in front of him, his voice deepening. "Let's see how long you can keep smiling." As soon as he finished speaking, he lunged forward with his sharp, holy sword. Bailaden leaned to the side, nimbly dodging the sword's tip. In a very slow moment, Bailaden's hand had quickly aimed for Iwu's left chest. He quickly clenched his hand into a fist, powerfully driving it straight into his opponent's chest. With just one move from him, Iwu was sent flying several meters away by the spiritual energy. The surrounding dust gradually settled. Bailaden was still in a combat-ready stance. Iwu struggled to sit up, clutching his arm, his face filled with unwillingness. His teeth were clenched tight. He thought a master. After realizing this, he quickly became aware of the situation and hurriedly said, Wait, I was wrong." His steps slowly approached. He asked softly, full of sarcasm, "Changing your attitude so quickly." A crazed look appeared on Bailaden's face. His ruthless eyes stared straight at Iwu. "It would be nice if your sword was as fast as that." Iwu, in the distance, was thoroughly terrified. Cold sweat began to trickle down. He cried out in panic, "Please, spare my my life. In the silent night, the two stood facing each other. Baileiden's flat voice echoed. Spare you? So you can run back and call for more people? Iwu hastily denied. I won't. Baileiden paid him no mind and gathered his strength to leap into the air. Following the momentum, he looked up. Iwu wanted to continue begging for mercy. Absolutely not. Before he could finish his sentence, a fist delivered an uppercut to his chin. With no time to react, he was immediately thrown backward. Before Iwu's body could even hit the ground, Baileiden leaped up again. He suddenly appeared at close range, his eyes gleaming, his leg raised high. Finally, a flash of light descended. Baileiden used one foot to stomp Iwu down into the ground. Dust and rubble flew. A deep pit had been indented in front of them. Iwu was driven headfirst into the pit by the kick. Baileiden looked down from above, his anger still not subsided, and said, "A person who kills just because a word affects their mood. Yet you dare to shamelessly beg for your life." At night, at a small inn, the streets were sparsely populated. Ziqianhua lifted his wine bowl and took a large gulp. Then he slowly placed the wine bowl down on the table. A small clinking sound was heard. Ziqianhua winced and gritted his teeth in pain. He raised a hand to touch it. His shoulder suddenly flinched. Remembering his shoulder being struck by considerable force, Ziqianhua couldn't help but feel angry. A green vein popped on his forehead. He cursed inwardly. Damn it, I was almost killed by someone like him. But even if I was attacked by surprise, I could still easily take him down. If I don't gouge out the eyes of all those damn Huyin family bastards, how can I quell this anger? Suddenly, his gaze shifted as he noticed something. He looked doubtfully into the distance. In front of him were three subordinates, standing at attention with their hands clasped behind their backs. Seeing this, Ziqianhua asked, "I haven't seen Iwu around, have I?" A big, burly man with a buzz cut among them spoke up hesitantly. "Big brother hasn't been back since yesterday, sir." Ziqianhua closed his eyes and exhaled sharply. "Yesterday?" The man continued, "Yes." He didn't say anything and just went out quietly. Ziqianhua slammed the table and stood up, his face furious as he shouted. He went out on his own and still hasn't bothered to show his face by now. Hearing this, the subordinates all bowed their heads in unison. No one dared to utter a word. The big man finally couldn't hold it in any longer and said, "I wonder if he went out because of that old woman from yesterday?" Remembering Nyang's face, Ziqianhua asked doubtfully, "You mean the old woman of that Huyanze fellow?" The man didn't answer, but thinking back to Iwu's retreating figure yesterday, he added, "Big brother went out right after that incident ended." After that, he was never seen again. Ziqianhua poured himself some wine, regained his composure, and asked, "Do you know the whereabouts of those people?" A man had been carefully following Nyang and her granddaughter on the street. Being asked, the big man answered immediately, "Of course, sir. Considering what she said yesterday, they might cause some trouble, so I had someone follow them right away." Ziqianhua held the wine bowl in his hand, closing his eyes and listening silently. The big man gestured with his hands and feet, speaking at length. "Yesterday, that old woman went to the Martial Arts Alliance to try and see the Alliance leader. But she couldn't even get into the Martial Arts Alliance, so she had to return dejectedly." His thick eyebrows knitted together. Ziqianhua finally looked up, his eyes wide, his face annoyed as he mumbled, "Damn old woman. As troublesome as her grandson. I let her go because many people were watching." And yet, with that, he turned, his voice deepening, "This Iwu went to see that damn old woman and never came back." The big man stood silently, not answering. Sima Tian winced, his eyes glaring. He loudly gave an order. "First, bring those people here." The subordinates immediately complied. "Yes, sir." Then they quickly shot out of the inn at a speed invisible to the naked eye. Now only Ziqianhua was left. He slowly drained the wine in his bowl. The bowl was placed forcefully on the table. Ziqianhua carelessly wiped the wine from the corner of his lips. He muttered in a low voice, "I've been really unlucky lately." On another side, in a small roadside eatery, Yang and Huyin Shuzhen sat opposite each other. In front of them was a small dining table. Huyin Shuzhen continuously tried to persuade her, "Grandma, you can't skip your meals like this. You have to keep trying." Yang's face clearly showed her disappointment. She seemed to pay no attention to those words. She remembered that morning, outside the high walls of the Alliance leader's residence. The two of them stood outside, waiting expectantly, only to be met with a loud voice. "No." The guard turned a blind eye, not even bothering to look as he continued, "You're not the only one with a grievance. The Alliance leader is not someone you can meet just because you want to." The two stood before the gate, momentarily at a loss. After a while, Huyin Shuzhen hesitantly asked, "Then what must we do to have an audience with the Alliance leader?" The guard casually replied, "Just leave a message, and you'll get to see him in due course." Hearing this, Huyin Shuzhen's face showed some confusion, and she asked again, "If I do that, when can I meet the Alliance leader?" The guard, with his hands on his hips, replied rather impatiently and perfunctorily, "Normally it would take 1 to 2 months, but depending on the case, you might not get to meet him at all." As soon as the words were out, both grandmother and granddaughter stood frozen on the spot. Back in the present, Yang was still lost in her thoughts. A voice called out by her ear, "Grandma." Huyin Shuzhen, at her wit's end, could only try to persuade her with words. "You have to keep trying. We will come back here again to find the Alliance leader." Yang bowed her head and sighed, then heard her continue, "You have to eat so that I can swallow my food." Finally, Yang picked up her chopsticks, her expression still somewhat displeased. That damn bastard. The two of them slowly ate their meal at a table near the window. In the distance, across the bustling street, a figure could be faintly seen hiding behind a wall. Baileiden carefully observed from a distance, a sympathetic expression on his face as he thought, "Fate has brought her before my eyes. A sudden movement from behind made him turn around curiously. He saw a person in a hooded cloak slowly enter the main door of the eatery. This person slowly walked up to the grandmother and granddaughter. Manhwa looked up in surprise. Zi Qianhua's subordinate, wearing a black hood with a sword at his hip, looked down coldly. Manhwa reacted immediately, her voice loud and wary as she asked, "Who are you?" The subordinate leaned in close, his eyes glaring, his voice threatening. "If you don't want to die, follow me quietly." Manhwa and Huyan Shuzhen both showed troubled expressions. In the end, they could do nothing but follow silently. A short while later, at the inn where Zi Qianhua was having his meal, he smiled, leisurely pouring wine into his bowl. Seeing that indifferent attitude, Manhwa finally couldn't hold back and spoke up. "Why did you bring us here?" The grandmother and granddaughter sat a table away from Zi Qianhua, with his subordinates standing guard behind them. He slowly raised his bowl, his expression nonchalant as he said, "Damn old woman, don't be so loud. I only brought you two here because I have something to ask." Hearing this, Manhwa was too angry to sit still. She shouted loudly, "If you needed to ask something, you should have come to see me directly. Why threaten and drag people here like this?" Zi Qianhua, in contrast, was quite calm. He said nothing, just smiled and silently enjoyed the wine in his hand. Suddenly, Zi Qianhua's expression changed, his brows furrowed, his eyes glaring as he growled, "Old woman, you really don't know what fear is, do you?" Very quickly, he returned to his usual expression, a glint flashing in his pupils, his voice carrying a hint of a threat. "It seems you don't cherish your old life anymore, do you?" With that, Zi Qianhua's eyes shifted to Huyan Shuzhen beside her. Manhwa was suddenly startled, then heard him continue, "Then you should also be careful for the life of the child by your side." Finally, she had a compromise. Although her expression was uncomfortable, she still used a gentle tone. "What do you want to ask?" Zi Qianhua didn't beat around the bush, bringing the wine to his lips, his eyes not looking at Manhwa, as if asking nonchalantly, "Did anyone come to see you two yesterday?" Manhwa's expression was a bit confused. "Who are you talking about?" Zi Qianhua once again drained the wine in his hand, not in a hurry to answer. A moment later, he wiped his mouth in annoyance, thinking to himself, "She doesn't look like she's lying at all." Taking a deep breath, Zi Qianhua poured himself more wine, his expression pensive as he wondered, "Then where on earth did Iwu go?" At that moment, two people were standing on the roof of the opposite building, observing all the activity in the inn from afar. The stone-faced number 7 and Guai Minglang stood on the high roof tiles, keeping watch. Number 7's gaze was sharp. She glanced over and gave an order, "Guai Minglang, eliminate Zi Qianhua as quickly as possible." In contrast, Guai Minglang had a more approachable expression. Hearing this, he couldn't help but ask, "Has the order to strike really been given?" Number 7 crossed her arms and replied in a low voice. Hearing this, Guai Minglang glanced down, let out a faint laugh, and said, "The Heavenly Blade Sect can actually order the death of the slaughterer." Her eyes suddenly caught someone's figure. That guy tilted his head to look. He only saw a figure dressed in red, simply walking into the main entrance of the inn. The big guy heard the commotion and curiously turned around. A man with a nonchalant expression casually pushed open the door. As soon as he stepped inside, he heard a loud shout, "Stop!" The big guy quickly approached, grabbed his shoulder with one hand, and said threateningly, "Get lost. This place isn't open for business today." This man was Baili Duan in disguise. Hearing this, he raised an eyebrow in doubt. Through the figures, he could see Zi Qianhua leisurely drinking wine in front of Manhwa and her granddaughter. Seeing this, he withdrew his gaze and asked with a smile, "Is that so?" The big guy immediately frowned, gritted his teeth, and looked at the person in front of him with a furious expression. Before he could make a move, a voice suddenly came from behind. "Let him in." Zi Qianhua slightly tilted his head, adding with a gentle expression, "It's an inn, after all. If there's a customer, we should serve them." Given permission, Baili Duan just smiled and walked past the furious big guy. He calmly walked to an empty table and called out loudly, "I want to order." The owner immediately came out, trembling, and replied, "Yes." Baili Duan then ordered, "Bring me wine and some snacks." The owner, with a worried expression, turned to look at Zi Qianhua in the distance. About that, he turned and saw him give a slight nod. Having received his permission, the innkeeper slowly walked back inside. Yes, now only Zi Qianhua's group and Baili Duan were left. He then chuckled and asked, "Who are you?" Baili Duan placed one hand on his hip. His other hand rested comfortably on the table as he introduced himself, "Just a passing traveler. I was hungry, so I came into an inn." Zi Qianhua smirked and let out a soft sigh. "Are there only one or two inns around here?" Hearing this, Baili Duan's face immediately darkened. He remained silent and did not answer. Seeing the other party silence, Zi Qianhua frowned, his eyes glaring, yet his mouth curved into a smile. "Stop barking nonsense, and tell me why you came here." Outside the inn, it was completely silent. Inside, Baili Duan also smirked and retorted, "Why would you think I have something to say to you?" Zi Qianhua's eyes widened. He gritted his teeth, his tone laced with sarcasm. "I'm just wondering, why does someone willing to die for a meal look so ordinary?" Baili Duan smiled, sighed, and shook his head slightly. The big subordinate finally couldn't hold back and shouted, "This bastard dares to laugh." Seeing him shout, Zi Qianhua waved his hand to stop him. "Stop it." The big guy, who was about to make a move, turned around in disbelief. Baili Duan then raised his head, let out another soft sigh, and looked straight at Zi Qianhua. He frowned in annoyance, thinking to himself, in this situation, he can still be so at ease. He clearly didn't come here just for a meal. After a moment, Zi Qianhua suddenly asked, "Are you from the Yin family?" Baili Li Duan raised a hand to his chin, muttering thoughtfully, "The Hu Yin family?" He then seemed to remember something and suddenly gave a meaningful smile. "Ah, but I've heard rumors about what happened in your Shandong." Saying that, he dropped his hand, his sharp eyes looking straight ahead, his tone carrying a hint of provocation. "And what's more, not long ago you also said you would wipe out all the members of the Hu Yin family who were present that day, didn't you?" Hearing this, Zi Qianhua said nothing, just frowning angrily at Li Duan. Then he suddenly laughed lightly and said, "I don't know how you found out about that." Pausing for a moment, Zi Qianhua sat up straight, his gaze fixed on Li Duan sitting far away. "But yes, that's right. I will eliminate all of those useless people." Mai Yang, who had been silent until now, suddenly jumped up and shouted, "Nonsense!" Li Duan paid little attention, his voice even, "The matter is already over. Why must you hunt them down to the last one?" For, at this point, he pressed his lips together, his voice dropping to a lower tone. "Is it because of your ridiculous pride?" Zi Qianhua was finally angered, his brows knitted tightly, the corner of his mouth twitching. "What?" Li Duan stopped joking, his eyes serious as he asked directly, "Is your pride so great that so many young people have to die for it?" Zi Qianhua smirked, showing no remorse at all. "Of course. How can that rabble compare to me?" Half of his face was shrouded in shadow. Li Duan couldn't contain his anger. He glanced at him, thinking to himself, "Now I know. To make a name for himself as the slaughterer of the Heavenly Blade sect, he has killed countless people. This reminds me of a Wu's arrogant face. His subordinate deliberately pursued and tried to kill me, just because I stood up against an injustice." His brows furrowed deeper, hatred evident in Li Duan's eyes. They're not people who don't know how to control their anger, but they don't even want to control it. Mo Bong's face also appeared in his thoughts, because there was no reason to control it at all. Thinking of this, Li Duan's expression became unpleasant. He said contemptuously, "In my opinion, you're even more ordinary than those people." The big guy finally couldn't take it anymore and turned to throw a punch, his mouth wide open as he cursed. "You bastard, you dare to play? With fire?" Li Duan remained silent, his feet moving slightly, sliding smoothly across the wooden floor. Before the big guy could land his punch, his collar was pulled forward by a powerful force. Li Duan's body barely even moved. With just one hand, he threw the big guy into the air. Just as a man flipped over, Li Duan swiftly pressed down with his hand. He leaned aside to dodge. Immediately after, the big guy plunged headfirst into the floor. Broken wood splinters flew everywhere. The subordinate in the black hood in the distance stared with wide eyes. As he turned, Mai Yang and Huyan Shuzhen were just as frightened. Zi Qianhua in the distance was also stunned by the series of movements. Everyone in the inn was momentarily frozen. As the dust settled, the big guy was seen motionless, his head stuck in the floor. After coming to his senses, the man in the black hood quickly ran over, calling out, "Big brother!" A moment later, his eyes widened, his pupils rapidly contracting, his expression stiffening. This person turned and stammered his report. "He's dead. His neck was broken." Zi Qianhua's face darkened, but he remained seated and silent. Li Duan glanced at the subordinate who was still waiting for orders from the man in the distance. He suddenly sprang from his chair. Before the man in the black hood could even notice, he quickly struck him hard on the neck. Li Duan waved his hand and turned away. The man in the black hood staggered for a moment. Finally, he collapsed face down on the ground in front of him. Seeing this, the remaining long-haired subordinate gritted his teeth and threw a punch. "Bastard." With that, the man clenched his fist and punched his opponent with all his might. Li Duan's face was impassive. He didn't dodge, just slightly extended his hand. His hand quickly caught the incoming fist. Li Duan turned, and with a flick, the force sent the other man tumbling. Before his opponent could react, he lunged forward again. This time, Li Duan clenched his fist and landed a powerful punch on the man's waist. Just like that, the long-haired subordinate was sent flying in front of Zi Qianhua. He crashed right onto the wine table where Zi Qianhua was sitting, which instantly broke in two. Fragments flew everywhere. Li Duan clenched his fists, still in a fighting stance. As the dust gradually settled, the long-haired man's face was dark, his eyes rolled back, and his whole body lay motionless. Mai Yang and her granddaughter were both terrified. Finally, Zi Qianhua brushed off his clothes and stood up, saying slowly, "As expected, you came here with another purpose from the very beginning." Li Duan glanced at him, resuming his smiling demeanor as he replied, "A purpose? Of course I have one. If I didn't, how could something like this happen, right?" Zi Qianhua frowned, finally conceding, "All right, what do you want?" Li Duan, however, had no intention of letting it go. He smirked, "That will happen right after I kill you, so you don't need to worry about it." Zi Qianhua was thoroughly enraged, swiftly drawing the sword at his waist and lunging forward. Shouting "Bastard!" Night was falling, and the street outside the inn was silent. The roof of an inn suddenly exploded, creating a large hole. Looking through the hole, one could only see thick smoke and dust. Li Duan leaped nimbly to dodge. Zi Qianhua tried to strike again, but Li Duan ducked to evade him. The inn was smashed to pieces, with small door fragments and rubble flying everywhere. Li Duan crouched slightly, his eyes fixed forward. Zi Qianhua slashed down frantically, the blade flashing before him. He roared, "Are you gonna run away like a little mouse?" Li Duan didn't answer. He leaned to the side and lifted one leg. Zi Qianhua also gathered momentum and swung his sword again. The two of them charged at each other through the dust. Li Duan delivered a powerful punch. Zi Qianhua gritted his teeth and immediately raised his sword to block. He was then pushed back by the strong force, kicking up a long trail of dust on the ground. When he looked at the sword in his hand again, again. The blade had cracked in two. The sword then slipped from Zi Qianhua's grasp and fell to the floor. Bali Duan also stopped. He took a few heavy breaths. In front of him, Zi Qianhua's eyes were white, and a source of bright golden spiritual energy emanated from his hands, gradually spreading around. Bali Duan's expression grew more interested. He chuckled lightly. I heard that Qianhua is a master of fist techniques, that he doesn't even use a sword. This is the first time I've had to deal with a fist technique master after learning the secret crane art. On the other side, Zi Qianhua frowned, his pupils gradually contracting, panting for a few breaths. His gaze quickly sharpened. He focused intently on what was in front of him. The two threw their fists straight at each other, and their chi immediately radiated outwards. Zi Qianhua frowned and gritted his teeth, punching down with all his might. In contrast, Bali Duan smiled provocatively. Punching again, Zi Qianhua put all his strength into a shout. The two clashed fists in midair, wave after wave, their chi filling the space. Mein Yang and Huyan Shuzhan were terrified by the fight before them. Bali Duan in the distance was still eager to continue. He bent his knees into a stance, and his chi immediately gathered. Then he spun around once, finally channeling the force into his fist, gritting his teeth as he punched towards his opponent. Seeing this, Zi Qianhua also rushed forward to meet the blow. Their fists collided once more. This time, a purple lightning bolt flashed from their hands. Both of their eyes turned white and then flashed brightly. The roof tiles of the inn were shattered, and dust and debris flew everywhere. The wall inside the inn was shattered by the powerful impact, and white smoke gradually spread out onto the street. As the dust settled, a figure struggled to crawl out of the rubble. Bali Duan turned his head to look. Zi Qianhua, with a resentful expression, clutched his blood-soaked arm and struggled to emerge. Bali Duan stood up straight and took a few breaths, his expression grim as he looked at his opponent. Thick white smoke rose in the middle of the street. The loud commotion attracted the attention of the people nearby. Whispers began to spread. What's going on? A man rubbed his chin, saying thoughtfully, it seems like martial artists are fighting inside. The person next to him could only sigh helplessly. On the other side, Zi Qianhua struggled to his feet. He panted continuously. How could I be overpowered by someone of this caliber? Bali Duan extended a hand forward, saying seriously, now, let's officially begin. Zi Qianhua's eyes were sharp, and he remained silent. Then suddenly, Zi Qianhua lunged forward with a punch. Bali Duan leaned to the side, easily dodging it, and nudged Zi Qianhua's elbow with his hand. He threw another punch. The space behind Bali Duan was quickly blown apart by a punch. Zi Qianhua gritted his teeth and glanced over, only to find that Bali Duan had dodged effortlessly. Timing it perfectly, he suddenly spun around and swung his arm. Bali Duan immediately ducked. His expression was fierce, his hand clenched into a fist. Before Zi Qianhua could react, Bali Duan landed a powerful blow straight into his stomach. Zi Qianhua was sent flying, spitting out a large mouthful of blood. He was thrown back several meters, the impact sending dust flying everywhere. Bali Duan leaned over, still in a fighting stance. Zi Qianhua's hair was a mess, and one of his ears was soaked with blood. He gritted his teeth, using the object behind him to support himself as he stood up. Bali Duan's eyes darkened. He thought to himself, if it were anyone else, they would probably have died from that last attack. Looking at Zi Qianhua, he saw only anger and unwillingness to accept defeat. His face darkened, his eyes flashed, and he quickly sprang forward. It's not over yet. Bali Duan crouched, raising his hands to prepare for the next blow. He stood up straight, waiting for Zi Qianhua's frantic attack. Before the punch could even be thrown, Bali Duan suddenly leaped and vanished from in front of him. Before he could react, a fist landed on Zi Qianhua's cheek. Red blood immediately sprayed out. His right chest quickly took a punch. The other side was also struck by another fist. Immediately after, Zi Qianhua's entire body was relentlessly pummeled by powerful punches. He finally couldn't hold on and leaned over to throw a punch. His hand was quickly and gently caught by Bali Duan's hand. He gripped his hand tightly and in one move, bent it backwards. His arm was instantly broken. Zi Qianhua let out a pained scream. Bali Duan abruptly released the broken arm and jumped back. Zi Qianhua struggled to breathe, looking at his opponent with a somewhat calculating expression. He only saw that Bali Duan's face was dark, his eyes filled with anger. Suddenly, Zi Qianhua lunged, this time towards Mein Yang and Huyan Shuzhan. He leaped, shooting like an arrow towards the grandmother and granddaughter. Before he could strike, Zi Qianhua was kicked away by Bali Duan. He was sent flying, his body crashing into a nearby inn. Zi Qianhua's appearance was now battered beyond recognition, and he struggled to let out pained sounds. The surrounding crowd immediately gathered to watch. As he looked up, he saw the figure of Bali Duan approaching. He tilted his head, his expression emotionless, his voice cold. I told you, didn't I? You look even more ordinary than the others. Let's see what you'll do next. Before he could speak, Zi Qianhua heard whispers from the crowd. Isn't that Qianhua the Heavenly Blade Sect? Qianhua was beaten so badly. Oh my god. Zi Qianhua's eyes widened, his pupils contracted, and he clenched his jaw tightly. As if provoked, he suddenly sprang up, shouting loudly, all of you, shut up. The onlookers gasped and fearfully backed away. His fist continued to swing forward with its momentum. Zi Qianhua's hand was once again gently caught by Bali Duan. The chi gathered gathered from the force of the blow spread out. All around, Baili Duan's face darkened, his hand tightening its grip on the fist. For a moment, his true face seemed to appear, looking down at his opponent with contempt, truly ordinary. Zi Qianhua's eyes widened, and his whole body froze for a moment. Seizing the opportunity, Baili Duan crouched and moved closer. He drove his elbow straight into Zi Qianhua's stomach. The force of the blow sent him flying into the air. Before he could fall, Zi Qianhua took another punch from Baili Duan. This one punch sent him skidding down a long stretch of the street, kicking up a cloud of dust. A long section of the road was filled with white dust. The crowd of onlookers watched in dead silence as Baili Duan sent the man flying with a single move. He then turned around with a cold expression. The crowd immediately became wary, even turning as if to flee. Baili Duan paid them no mind, shouting loudly, "Heavenly Blade Sect, where the deputy to the Martial Arts Alliance leader is sending his successors across the Central Plains to build power and seize real authority. This is my warning." Looking at the bloodied and motionless Zi Qianhua in the distance, Baili Duan's words seemed to echo, "Those who dare to treat the martial world as a joke will definitely pay a heavy price." He then looked towards Mai Nyang and Huyin Shuzhen. That old lady over there came to this place to clarify the death of her grandson, Sun'er, who was a disciple of the Huyin family. But she couldn't even get an audience with the Alliance leader. The crowd in the distance all bowed their heads in thought. Baili Duan continued, "In the end, for whose benefit does the Alliance leader exist? Is it for the Heavenly Blade Sect?" Saying that, he narrowed his eyes and scanned the crowd, finally concluding loudly, "Today, I stand here to tell the Heavenly Blade Sect and the Alliance leader that justice still exists in this martial world." Just then, Huyin Shuzhen beside him suddenly spoke up. "May this humble young lady ask for this benefactor's esteemed name?" He turned his head and sighed, just smiling without answering. Then he clasped his hands behind his back, leaped up, and left. Huyin Shuzhen stood silently, watching Baili Duan's back as he slowly disappeared into the deep night. As Baili Duan walked, he thought, the reason I showed myself today was not just to save Mai Nyang and Huyin Shuzhen. I want to create a hero. In the distance, Mai Nyang and Huyin Shuzhen hesitantly looked towards where his back had disappeared. Baili Duan leaped from roof to roof and left, his mind still racing. "I will quietly build my power, and when injustice occurs, I will appear as this nameless wanderer." Under the bright moonlight, his figure leaped nimbly from place to place, his mind still calculating. "This is a way to draw attention, so that I, Baili Duan, can escape the eyes of the enemy and cultivate my strength." With that thought, he vanished in midair. On the roof tiles, Guai Menglang, who had just arrived, muttered in disappointment. I missed him. Chi Zi, who had been standing there for a long time, her eyes still looking into the distance, asked, "Did you let him go on purpose?" Guai Menglang frowned and said with a smile, "Thank you for thinking so highly of my abilities, sister. But the truth is, even though I tried to tail him." At this point, Guai Menglang's expression suddenly changed. Her eyes widened, her smile stiffening. "I lost his trail." Chi Zi glanced over, her expression a little thoughtful. Then she looked out into the distance again. "That person seems to be a master, doesn't he?" Guai Menglang also looked. Not just that, the two stood side by side. After a pause, Guai Menglang added, "He's a master among masters. This is the first time in my life I've seen that kind of martial art." Elsewhere, an angry man slammed his hand on a table. Sima Tian had a grim expression, his hand on the table clenched tightly as he asked in a strained voice, "Who the hell is that guy?" Hearing this, Sima Tian became even more furious. He slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "A master like that just fell from the sky? You call this a report? Go find him for me." Immediately, hearing this, the subordinates all quickly went to carry out the order. Zhuge Liang, who was last to leave, bowed his head, muttering something. Just as he was about to go out, Sima Tian called him, "Military advisor Zhuge, stay for a moment." Outside the mansion, it was quiet. Sima Tian's voice slowly rang out. "How's work been lately?" Zhuge Liang placed a hand on his chest and bowed respectfully, replying, "It's been all right." Sima Tian leaned his elbow on the table, his body leaning forward slightly as he asked with a smirk, "The number of gray hairs on your head has increased quite a bit lately, hasn't it?" Zhuge Liang replied blandly, "This subordinate is getting old, after all." Hearing this, Sima Tian said no more. He closed his eyes and smiled faintly, thinking smugly to himself, "You are now just a former chief advisor who is gradually losing all his energy, nothing more, nothing less." With that thought, he suddenly shifted his gaze, his sharp eyes glancing at Zhuge Liang. "I wonder if you can guess who caused this incident? What about Ba Bao? It seems his inn has been closed lately, hasn't it?" Zhuge Liang bowed his head without answering, cold sweat uncontrollably trickling down his cheek. Only after a long moment did he regain his composure. Zhuge Liang replied blandly, "This subordinate heard that the person killed Qianhua with his bare hands, while the Ba Bao, this subordinate knows, is a master of swordsmanship. This subordinate has never once seen him use fist techniques." Sima Tian leaned back, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "That's true. In that case, who could that person be?" Zhuge Liang still stood respectfully and said, "In this subordinate's opinion, it's very likely he is someone sent by the Huyin family." Hearing this, Sima Tian turned to him. "Just because Qianhua and the Huyin family had a conflict, you think the culprit is the Huyin family?" Thinking of Zi Qianhua's resolute expression and indifferent attitude when talking to Mai Nyang and Huyin Shuzhen, his expression darkened somewhat. He said slowly, "Didn't Qianhua bluntly state that he wanted to kill all the disciples of the Huyin family? In addition, he also captured Huyin Zai's grandmother and younger sister and teased them." Sima Tian stopped his hand movements, looking over with a doubtful expression. "Did that happen as well?" Zhuge Liang narrowed his eyes and replied, yes, this subordinate has received reports from those who were present, and this is the truth. Sima Tian's face darkened. He raised a hand to cover half his face, seemingly thinking about something. Zhuge Liang's back was ramrod straight. He bowed his head and thought to himself, Sima Tian is always highly vigilant of me, but as long as I show him a powerless appearance, all suspicion will be removed. Moreover, if I can demonstrate my ability to be useful to him like this, it will be even more natural. Thinking of this, Zhuge Liang's brows furrowed even tighter, his expression showing a hint of unwillingness. After long silence, Sima Tian suddenly glanced over, his tone satisfied. Good. I will give you full authority to investigate this matter. Prepare the manpower, and at all costs, find a culprit for me. As if not expecting it, Zhuge Liang's face immediately lit up with joy. Really? Sima Tian tilted his head, smiling generously, and said, I can't let you stay here doing menial tasks forever. Now, show me your abilities to your heart's content. Zhuge Liang happily cupped his fist and bowed. Thank you, military advisor. This subordinate will definitely do his best to resolve this matter. Sima Tian smirked, his eyes showing clear satisfaction. Zhuge Liang, who was bowing, also glanced up, his expression sinister. Outside the inn, the sky was clear and blue. In the room, Baili Duan was sitting cross-legged in cultivation. Then he frowned slightly, his expression somewhat uncomfortable. Recalling when he threw a punch into Kim Hoa's stomach, he thought to himself, thanks to the fight with Kim Hoa, my immortal crane secret art has been able to advance from the 7th to the 8th level. In terms of cultivation time, this is an incredible achievement. The scene transitions to when he sent Kim Hoa flying. Beak Lydon couldn't help but wonder, I'm really looking forward to it. If I could master the immortal crane secret art, just how strong could I become? A loud shout from outside suddenly startled him, making him open his eyes. Young master, Kwang Dao rushed in from outside, shouting loudly, have you heard the news? Beak Lydon slowly put on his robe and got out of bed, asking what news. Kwang Dao quickly came over and recounted a long story. A nameless great hero killed a butcher from the Heavenly Blade sect with a single punch. He even declared that if the Heavenly Blade sect dares to commit evil deeds in the future, he will definitely step into slaughter and punish them. Beak Lydon lowered his head and let out a helpless, soft laugh, thinking in confusion. A nameless great hero? Also, I never said I would step into slaughter and punish them, did I? He suddenly remembered something and looked up, praising yes, truly skilled. Kwang Dao, however, had a quizzical look on his face. What's with your reaction, young master? Beak Lydon asked back, what's wrong with my reaction? Then the boy narrowed his eyes, looking at the person before him with a scrutinizing expression. Could it be? Beak Lydon sighed, thinking pensively. Could it be that this kid has already recognized me? Just as he was about to speak, Kwang Dao in front of him suddenly asked, are you jealous, young master? Before he could say anything, the boy turned away, smiling and muttering to himself, don't be like that. The young master is cool, and the nameless great hero is beyond amazing. Both are great. Hearing this, Beak Lydon frowned slightly, then turned to tease him, I'm cool, and the nameless great hero is beyond amazing. It seems there's a big gap between those two compliments, isn't there? Kwang Dao immediately laughed shyly, clutching his chest, his voice full of emotion. To stand up righteously to protect someone, that's the image this subordinate has always dreamed of. With that, he gazed into the distance, his mind dreaming of the future. This subordinate must cultivate diligently, so I can also stand up to protect someone. Beak Lydon said nothing, tilting his head to look at him, his gaze softening. I understand Kwang Dao's heart. For any martial artist in the Jianghu, who wouldn't be stirred upon hearing such news, right? Seeing the boy's excited appearance, he couldn't help but think a little more. But Kwang Dao, you must understand one thing. Beak Lydon slightly bowed his head, his eyes darkening, his expression pensive as he thought. The life of a hero, it may seem glamorous on the outside, but the truth is that person must overcome many ideological struggles. With that thought, he clasped his hands behind his back and slowly walked to the window. The light from outside shone through the window frame, faintly revealing his imposing silhouette. Behind the heroic deeds are thousands upon thousands of victories and crumbling humiliations. Afternoon gradually fell. The fading sun cast an orange glow on the closely built inns. Kong Chu-sin bowed his head and reported in a low voice. The work of the Tai Tin Trading Guild is proceeding very smoothly. Beak Lydon sat at a table in the middle of the room, engrossed in a book. Kong Chu-san, beside him, continued. The reason this subordinate came here today is because of the ledger the young master gave me last time. He said nothing, just quietly held the book in his hands, reading intently. This is the ledger kept by the Tien of Sundong, the trading. Kong Chu-san bowed again and presented another book, saying, fortunately, most of the code in this ledger is based on the code system we use, so deciphering it was not too difficult. And this is the book recording the monetary transactions. Beak Lydon listened while flipping through the pages of the book, remaining silent all the while. Kong Chu-san carefully observed his expression, then chose his words to add, the Tien has invested in many trading guilds throughout the Central Plains in a personal capacity. This subordinate has looked into the profits of those guilds. They're truly very high. If the young master allows it, this subordinate will try to place our chopsticks on these dining tables. Still slowly turning the pages, Beak Lydon didn't look up, his voice even. We cannot reveal ourselves. Kong Chu-sin glanced at him again, his demeanor casual as he continued. Young master doesn't need to worry about that. Only 1 or 2 people invest in a trading guild. At the least, there are a few dozen, and at most, it can be up to hundreds. If we're not too greedy, we will definitely not be exposed. Finally finished reading, Beek Don gently placed the book on the table, considered for a moment, then agreed. I understand. Chief Steward Kong, please take care of this. Then he took out a folded piece of paper and gave it to Kong Chu-san. Also, can you take a look at this for me? The hand holding the paper tightened, and an image of a motionless person, half slumped to the ground, appeared. Pausing for a moment, Beek Don added, can you decipher this code? Kong Chu-san took the piece of paper, unfolded it, and slowly read it. After a moment, he rubbed his chin, looking thoughtful. This code is truly very difficult. This subordinate is truly powerless to help. Beek Don was a bit disappointed. He nodded and sighed. Before he could say anything, Kong Chu-san suddenly continued, but this subordinate knows someone who is capable of doing this. Hearing that, Beek Don quickly turned to him. Who is it? Recalling the tired face of Chief Steward Tong, Kong Chu-san slowly replied, it is this subordinate's master. Beek Don thought for a moment, then asked, Chief Steward Trunk? Kong Chu-san said with a firm voice, my master can definitely decipher this code. Hearing this, Beek Don could only force a laugh, thinking in disbelief. The grumpy Chief Steward Trunk at my home can decipher such a difficult code? Later, at the Baklai residence, looking at the large and small packages on the table, Chief Steward Tong crossed his arms, a puzzled look on his face. What is this? Beek Don let out a soft laugh and explained, these are some medicinal herbs that are good for one's health, and these are some new clothes that are perfect for spring. On the table was a neatly folded set of clothes, with a few packets of medicine next to it. Beek Don said politely, I bought them at a very famous shop in Wuhan. I did. Chief Steward Tong paid little attention and turned away, his expression a bit impatient. So why did the young master bring me this trap? Beek Don, sitting opposite him, was a bit flustered and forced a smile. What trap? It's just a small token of my sincerity. Chief Steward Tong used a sarcastic tone. A gift, you say? Hearing this, Beek Don was a bit flustered and tried to find some pleasant words. I want to thank you for introducing such a good chief steward to me. Finally losing his patience, Chief Steward Tong let out a sharp breath. Cut the nonsense. If you want to ask for something, just say it quickly. Beek Don kept the smile on his face, not intending to beat around the bush any longer. You truly see through the mortal world. Chief Steward Tong, without any courtesy, waved his hand. It's just that the young master's ambition is too obvious. Beek Don didn't know what to say and could only let out a soft laugh. After a moment, he leaned forward, reached into his pocket, and took something out. Beek Don held the piece of paper in front of Chief Steward Tong. Can you help me decipher this, please? Chief Steward Tong took the piece of paper, rubbing his chin as he examined it. Looking at the squiggly characters written on it, he muttered, this is a very difficult type of code. Then Chief Steward Tong supported his back with one hand and slowly got up from his chair, saying, young master, come back tonight. Beek Don was a little stunned. That fast? The old man didn't reply, just turned and walked to the bookshelf. He added a condition. All right, in return, bring a jug of good wine when you come back. Beek Don also hurriedly stood up. Yes, just like that. Without another word, he also quietly went out and opened the door. Suddenly, Chief Steward Tong's voice sounded from behind, startling him and making him turn back. Is that kid still doing well? The old man opened a book and began to read it intently, not even bothering to turn his head. Beek Don smiled knowingly and replied, yes, he's very well. Chief Steward Tong remained standing still, and only after a long moment did he say in a low voice, that's good then. With that, Beek Don also turned with a light heart to leave. He opened the door and slowly stepped out. The door closed with a click, and now only Chief Steward Tong was left standing in the room. Outside, the streets were bustling with people passing by. Tong Ho-Alan, wearing a splendid outfit with a flower clip in her hair, had a smiling face and a gentle voice as she said, when did you return, young master? Beek Don walked beside her with his hands clasped behind his back, smiling as he replied, something came up that required me to come home, but I have to leave again soon. Hearing this, Tong Ho-Alan blushed slightly with shyness, her gaze averted as she muttered, so that's how it is. Secretly recalling how Beek Don had suddenly approached her while she was practicing her sword, Tong Ho-Alan couldn't help but feel happy in her heart. Even though he returned in a hurry, he still made time to see me. Thinking this, she turned to him, her expression excited. What is Wuhan like? Beek Don sighed and said mysteriously, more people, more complicated. The two of them walked side by side like that. Not knowing what came to her mind, Tong Ho-Alan suddenly asked, then there must be many women more beautiful than me, right? Beek Don didn't think much of it and casually replied, even if there are. Reaching this point, he realized something and cautiously glanced over. He met Tong Ho-Alan's gaze, who was also looking at him. Her cheeks were flushed, and the corners of her mouth couldn't help but tremble. Beek Don quickly turned away, clearing his throat with a few coughs. Seeing this, Tong Ho-Alan shrugged, smiled, and said nonchalantly, that's to be expected. It's a big city, after all. There must be many beautiful women. Beek Don regained his composure and glanced over at her. No matter how many there are, women more beautiful than you, miss. Reaching this point, he suddenly stopped. Tong Ho-Alan's cheeks turned bright red as she looked over shyly. After stopping, Beek Don suddenly quickened his pace, a smile on his face as he finished his sentence, startling Tong Ho-Alan. Do exist from time to time. Finally, she let out a disappointed inhale and exhale. Beek Don tilted his head to look back, seemingly very pleased as he laughed out loud. Tong Ho-Alan quickly caught up to his pace, and the two of them laughed together with great amusement. The silhouettes of Tong Ho-Alan and Beek Don continued down the crowded street, gradually disappearing from view. That night, at the Beak family estate, Chief Steward Tong presented a piece of paper, speaking slowly. I've finished deciphering the code. The words on the paper meant, on a certain month, at a certain time, Hunan Province, Pang City, Chu Family Manor. Beak Lidon took the paper and studied it intently. After a moment, he asked with confusion, isn't a certain month, a certain time this month? Chief Steward Tong glanced at him and continued, to be precise, it's 8 days from now. Beak Lidon's expression darkened, and a cold drop of sweat ran down his cheek. Without looking up, he thought to himself, the content of this paper is to gather at the Chu Family Manor in Pang City, Hunan Province, in 7 days? If this is the location, I still have enough time to get there. With that thought, he put on a polite tone and said, thank you, Steward, for your help. Chief Steward Tong, on the contrary, immediately denied it. What is there to thank me for? He narrowed his eyes, assessing him for a moment, and finally asked directly, but is this a dangerous matter? Beak Lidon smiled and replied, how could it be? Chief Steward Tong frowned and sighed, saying no more. Beak Lidon tilted his head to reassure him, you don't need to worry so much. Not wanting to say more, Chief Steward Tong slowly stood up, even feigning a warning. I won't fall for this trap again next time, you know? Beak Lidon slowly put the paper away, his eyes wide as he replied, but it's too late. Now I know what Chief Steward Trung cares about the most. Chief Steward Tong turned and left without a word. Beak Lidon also stood up in silence. His gaze softened a few degrees, the corners of his mouth curving as he thought to himself. Even after hearing that, he didn't utter a word about not helping. Early the next morning, Hunan Province. A figure wearing a conical hat gradually blended into the crowded street. Beak Lidon had once again disguised himself as the middle-aged man from when he met Tu Kim Hoa. He narrowed his eyes, silently assessing his surroundings. From a distance, he could see a few people carrying things and cheerfully heading in one direction. Seeing this, Beak Lidon quickly walked over and asked a man nearby, where is everyone going? The man heard him and turned to explain, today is the birthday of the master of the Chu family manor. Beak Lidon's eyes darkened, and he frowned slightly, beginning to ponder in his heart. The birthday of the master of the Chu family manor. Martial artists of the Jianghu often use days like this to hold secret meetings. Because many people will gather, the meeting won't attract attention. Just like that, he walked down the street, lost in thought, and gradually merged into the crowd of people. The main gate of the Chu family manor was wide open, and the area in front was extremely crowded. To one side, a man with a thick beard was sitting, waiting to announce names, asking with a bored expression, your esteemed name? Beak Lidon walked up and wrote down a name, Bitch. This name was the owner of the paper with the coded message. The man, seeing the person in front of him write the name, looked a little stunned. His eyes followed him continuously, until Beak Lidon adjusted his hat and turned to leave. He stepped out of the temporary shed set up outside the manor gate, and slowly entered the main gate. The sound of footsteps echoed in the vast space. Everything was decorated in traditional wooden architecture. In every corner, people sat chatting animatedly. People were drinking and happily greeting each other. Mingling in the crowd, Beak Lidon carefully scanned his surroundings. Why did you bitch have to encode the date of a birthday party and keep it? A wary look appeared in his eyes. He looked around but still couldn't understand. This was a place that anyone could attend. Suddenly, there was a commotion up ahead, and it seemed everyone was heading in one direction. Seeing this, Beak Lidon also looked over curiously. In front of him was the master of the Chu family. He stepped out with his arms wide open, shouting loudly, thank you all for coming to celebrate this old man's birthday. To be so favored by my friends from the Jianghu, even if this old man were to die today, I would have no regrets. The master of the Chu family looked down at the large crowd before him and shouted again, everyone, please eat and drink to your heart's content. The journey was long and arduous. Once again, this old man thanks everyone. As he finished speaking, the crowd immediately surged forward, all talking at once and shouting loudly. May the Manor Master live a long and prosperous life. Happy birthday, Manor Master. The master of the Chu family above had a happy expression and continuously waved his hand. Through the crowd, Beak Lidon's sharp gaze was fixed on the old man. Amidst the noise, a voice suddenly sounded by his ear, startling him and making him turn. Master Chu, is that right? A young lady with her hair in a low bun, dressed in a purple outfit with the lower half of her face covered, had appeared before him at some point. This person bowed respectfully and said, please follow me, miss. Just like that, Beak Lidon followed this young lady into the back courtyard and to a small gate. Along the way, his eyes constantly observed his surroundings. Suddenly, he stopped, his expression one of astonishment, his eyes wide open. The young lady led Beak Lidon to a large room. In front, another person was standing. That person was Tam Hong, his sharp eyes looking towards him. Walking closer, Beak Lidon cautiously pulled his hat down, his heart on high alert. A master. He's even stronger than Kim Hoa. He walked past Tam Hong and entered, his expression darkening as he told himself, a place like this is a master like this? The two of them walked past each other, their eyes not meeting. After leading Beak Lidon in, the young lady slowly withdrew. He immediately glanced around the room. In front of him was a long staircase leading up, where two people stood quite far apart. One had short hair and a cold expression, while the other was older, with a calm face and a much deeper gaze. Beak Lidon's expression immediately changed, his brows knitting tightly. He couldn't help but ponder. These two people indeed have skills that cannot be underestimated. Why are they here? A loud noise interrupted his train of thought. Startled, he turned. Tam Hong was leading a line of people, entering from the door. Then that man stepped forward and introduced himself nonchalantly. nonchalantly. I am Tam Hong. First, I will verify the invitations. Hearing this, Beak Lidon's face immediately paled and cold sweat ran down his cheek. He was startled. An invitation. He glanced over at the person from before. This person stepped forward and dropped a small piece of paper into a bowl of water, brought by the person next to Tam Hong. Beak Lidon's eyes suddenly widened as he watched intently from a distance. As the small piece of paper nearly touched the bowl of water, he suddenly realized it's the piece of paper hidden in the arrow. Is this why Chu Bitch didn't throw that paper away? The paper was then dropped into the large bowl of water. At first, there was nothing. Then, from the paper, a dark green substance gradually spread across the water's surface. One by one, people came forward to drop their paper into the man's bowl of water. The person in front of him passed, and it was Beak Lidon's turn to step forward. Tam Huang's eyes immediately fixed on him, scrutinizing him. Like everyone else, he dropped the piece of paper into the bowl of water. Tam Huang's gaze did not leave his movements for a second. The paper quickly released the green substance, dyeing the surface of the water. Tam Hong finally closed his eyes and turned away as if to let him pass. Beak Lidon bowed his head, silently letting out a sigh of relief. But in the next moment, a sharp sword flashed through the air. Tam Hong suddenly swung his sword. Fortunately, Beak Lidon leaned back, and only the hat on his head was sliced in two. He frowned, gritting his teeth as he looked angrily at the man. Tam Huang's eyes flashed, his hand tightly gripping the sword held out in front of him. The man glared at Beak Lidon, his cold voice ringing out, "You're not too bitch." Upon hearing this, the people present all simultaneously stepped back and drew the swords at their waists, assuming a battle-ready stance. Beak Lidon let out a soft breath and slowly took off his outer robe. He said softly, "You don't know anything about the meaning of an invitation, do you?" His pupils flashed, his brows knitted tightly. Beak Lidon looked up and let out a mocking laugh. "If you're just inviting acquaintances, what's the point of an invitation?" As soon as he finished speaking, a loud burst of laughter suddenly came from a distance. The master of the Chu family, who had appeared out of nowhere, said with a look of satisfied approval, "He's right." He had guards on either side of him. The master of the Chu family clasped his hands behind his back, standing in the center. "As long as you bring the invitation, you are qualified to pass." With that, he looked towards Beak Lidon in front of him and said in a gentle tone, "If you're not Chu Bitch, then what is your real identity?" Beak Lidon raised an eyebrow, his expression annoyed as he refused, "I don't like to reveal it." As soon as he finished speaking, Tam Hong couldn't help but raise his sword again. "You dare?" The master of the Chu family stepped down and gently waved his hand to stop him. "That's enough." With that, the old man turned and asked probingly, "It seems you have a high price, so you won't even reveal your identity. Is that right?" Beak Lidon glanced at the old man and smirked mockingly. "Aren't you all going to rush in and capture me after hearing my name anyway?" Seemingly finding it very interesting, the master of the Chu family once again let out a burst of laughter. That's right, the people present still hadn't lowered their swords. The master of the Chu family regained his leadership demeanor, cleared his throat, and said loudly, "Very well. As someone who brought an invitation, you also have a right to ask a few questions." His sharp eyes were clearly visible under his long eyebrows, his aged face showing a hint of caution as he asked, "It seems Chu Bitch is already dead. But how did you obtain this invitation?" Then, Beak Lidon admitted frankly with a blank expression, "Because I was the one who killed him." The master of the Chu family didn't seem very surprised after hearing this. He continued, "So that's how it is. In that case, I will be so rude as to ask one more question. Who are you?" Beak Lidon bowed his head and let out a soft breath, smiling nonchalantly as he replied, "I'm simply someone who cannot stand by and let a person kidnap children and send them to a brothel." The master of the Chu family's face immediately darkened and his eyes grew dim. Before the old man could continue, Beak Lidon spoke up again. "Now it's my turn to ask, right?" He glanced around at everyone, finally stopping at the master of the Chu family. "What exactly is this place?" The old man spread his arms wide, explaining in a level voice, "As you can see, everyone is here to celebrate my birthday with me. The people here are just specially selected guests." Beak Lidon impatiently cut him off, stopped beating around the bush, and get to the point. The master of the Chu family closed his eyes and took a deep breath, finally admitting, "We are people who want to create a new Jianghu." Beak Lidon raised an eyebrow and gave a cold laugh. He repeated, "Create a new Jianghu." The master of the Chu family paused for a moment before adding, "A Jianghu of righteousness and chivalry." This old man is now recruiting talented individuals. He looked at the group of masters and Beak Lidon present. He then continued, "It will no longer be a Jianghu ruled by the old grandmasters, but a new Jianghu where true martial artists like you are the masters." After hearing this, Beak Lidon couldn't help but let out a faint laugh. The master of the Chu family above was a little confused. "Why are you laughing?" Beak Lidon turned away, not looking at the old man. "Speaking of old grandmasters," he paused, then turned to look directly at the master of the Chu family. "Well, an old man like you doesn't look very young either." His two long eyebrows knitted together. The master of the Chu family's face darkened, his eyes clearly showing his displeasure. After a moment, he suddenly laughed loudly and said magnanimously, "Isn't that why I called you all here?" Beak Lidon smirked again, his words blunt. "Just say you want to dominate the Jianghu and be done with it." Hearing such words, the master of the Chu family was not angry, but remained very gentle. In the pursuit of a great cause, misunderstanding and jealousy are two unavoidable things. Beak Lidon's lips curved, not continuing the argument. "All right, let's just say I misunderstood you. With that, he asked loudly again. So what do we get for joining the society? The steward behind him brought a small tray. The master of the Chu family held his head high and declared majestically, power. In the tray were 6 small pills. He paused for a moment before continuing. This is the heavenly merit pill, a spiritual medicine that can instantly grant the one who consumes it half a cycle of internal energy. Upon hearing this, the martial artists were all stunned, their mouths agape and their eyes wide. The master of the Chu family continued to declare, in addition, I will impart to you a martial arts technique that is even more wonderful than the one you currently possess. At this point, he suddenly pointed at Beek Lydon. Only now did he truly reveal his purpose. Of course, whoever kills that man will get his heavenly merit pill. Hearing this, the 2 martial artists both turned to look at him. Beek Lydon frowned, his expression darkening. One person's foot stomped hard on the wooden floor. The long-haired man rushed forward first, swinging his sword. Beek Lydon nimbly leaned back to dodge. Immediately after, he used his elbow to strike hard at the man's chin. The man had no time to react and was hit so hard that blood splattered everywhere. Just like that, his body collapsed limply. The long-haired man lay face down at Bitch Lydon's feet. The Chu clan head and Tam Hong, who were present, were stunned by the scene before them. The remaining short-haired martial artists' eyes widened in disbelief. The other man slowly approached to take the pill from the tray. I'll just eat my share. As soon as he finished speaking, Bitch Lydon, who was below, suddenly asked, is this thing really a Tien Song pill? With that, he bowed his head and chuckled, then said, let's just assume, for a moment, that I want to swallow this entire Jianghu. And in my hands, I have many Tien Song pills. The Chu clan head said nothing, silently listening to his words that in that case, would I eat them all to increase my own internal energy, or would I call a bunch of strangers over and give the pills to them? Hearing this, the other martial artist's expression darkened. He pursed his lips, his eyes showing a contemplative look. Suddenly, his eyes widened, his expression stiffening. A cruel sword pierced through the martial artist's chest, causing him to collapse. Red blood spurted out. The Chu clan head stood still, his face expressionless. Bitch Lydon frowned warily, thinking, a sharp, fast sword. The old man is a master. His cultivation is even higher than Tam Huang's. The hand gripping the sword was covered in fresh blood. The Chu clan head muttered, looks like today's business is ruined. With that, the old man turned to leave, not forgetting to instruct the person behind him. Get rid of that other one for me too. Bitch Lydon turned around and saw a group of swordsmen rushing forward in unison. He didn't evade, his face cold as he charged straight at them. Bitch Lydon spun around, easily knocking a swordsman away. His pupils flashed as he tilted his shoulder, his hands swinging with momentum. Dense chi energy gathered in his palm, and with each punch, Bitch Lydon sent a man flying. He then glanced to the side. He nimbly dodged the gleaming sword that was about to strike down. Bitch Lydon spun, his hand flinging the swordsman far away. The surrounding men were quickly taken down by him, one move at a time. The dust settled, revealing only men and their swords scattered across the ground. The Chu clan head turned to look, his eyes widening in astonishment. The remaining men who were about to charge were frightened and retreated in unison. Tam Hong, standing behind the crowd, warned loudly, he's a master, be careful. Through the dissipating dust, Bitch Lydon's sharp gaze was fixed on that man's position. The next moment, he suddenly vanished. Bitch Lydon tore through the air, rushing in front of a martial artist. He swung his fist, sending the man flying, but didn't notice someone launching a sneak attack from behind. The man tried to swing his sword, but was suddenly caught by Bitch Lydon. He spun around and kicked the man away. Then Bitch Lydon swept his leg across the ground, somersaulting. Finally, he lashed out with his foot, kicking the man straight down into the floor. The sounds of fighting echoed all around as the Chu clan head stood silently observing. Wood splinters flew everywhere, and a group of men were sent rolling a long way, stopping at the tip of Tam Huang's toes. Looking at the motionless man on the ground, that man couldn't help but curse. Damn it! A flash of anger appeared in Tam Huang's eyes, his brows furrowing tightly. That man roared, kill him. With that, he grabbed his sword and rushed forward with countless cold, sharp sword strikes. Bitch Lydon didn't evade, but charged straight ahead. He nimbly dodged every slash. Tam Huang's eyes widened in disbelief. Then he quickly swung his arm. The sword strike flashed by, but Bitch Lydon leaned back to dodge it. He rushed towards Tam Hong, catching the man off guard. Bitch Lydon's face was hidden in shadow, but his eyes shone brightly. He said in a low voice, if you can't hold out until the very last moment, you shouldn't have entered this Jianghu in the first place. Tam Huang's face was now utterly terrified, cold sweat trickling down his temples. Before the man could react, he took a punch to the stomach from Bitch Lydon. The powerful fist sent Tam Hong flying into the distance. The man was sent crashing into a corner, and a loud crash immediately rang out. The dust settled, revealing Tam Hong lying motionless on the floor. The Chu clan head, who had watched the entire fight without reacting, finally spoke. A nameless great hero, the one who killed the slaughterer of the heavenly blade sect. As he spoke, the old man's expression darkened, his eyes sizing him up, his voice cold as he confirmed, that must be you. The corner of Bitch Lydon's mouth curved up. He turned his head to look straight ahead, with no intention of explaining. The Chu clan head paid little attention to his expression, saying in a steady voice, if he is a shadowless wanderer, then it seems this old man has sent out a very special invitation. Bitch Lydon bent down and picked up the Tien Song pill. He held it up, examining it seriously. This is not a Tien Song pill. When I was the alliance leader, I took a Tien Song pill before, so there's no mistaking it. This medicinal medicinal pill, besides the scent of a Tian Tsung pill, also has another scent. Suddenly thinking of something, his eyes widened, and with a stunned expression, he looked down at it again. Looking at the rough, glossy black pill before him, he suddenly thought of something. The no-regret demonic spirit pill. Something from the demonic cult, a faction that was annihilated. Why is it here? Now, only Bitch Lai Don and the Chu clan head's men were left standing, facing each other, surrounded by scattered corpses. An image of a giant pill appeared, a martial artist sitting cross-legged in front of it, cultivating. Reflected below was the shadow of a fierce demon surrounded by demonic energy. The no-regret demonic spirit pill can indeed grant its user a cycle of internal energy. But once taken, one will surely die after 7 years. That's why this pill has another name, the demon spirit pill. Bitch Lai Don's face darkened. He stood up straight. Before him was the pill, emitting swirling white energy. Taking 2 pills will grant 1 cycle of internal energy, but one's lifespan will be shortened to only 3 years. And if you take 3 pills, you will immediately gain 1.5 cycles of internal energy, but it means you will only have 1 year left to live. Seeing him remain silent for a long time, the Chu clan head couldn't help but ask again, how about it? If you take it, this old man promises to treat you very specially. Bitch Lai Don raised an eyebrow, his expression probing. After a moment, he looked straight at the old man and reconfirmed, have you also taken this? The Chu clan head let out a breath, with no intention of answering. What does that have to do with you? If you don't take it, there's still plenty of others who would disregard the consequences for internal energy. As soon as the old man finished speaking, windows from all sides were suddenly forced open. The sound of hurried footsteps came from all directions. Bitch Lai Don glanced around. Soon, the surroundings were packed with people. The martial artists kept coming, more and more of them quickly filling the room. Bitch Lai Don narrowed his eyes, assessing the entire group. A black aura surrounded each of the martial artists, all of them moving as if they were being controlled. He thought to himself, are all these people related to the demonic cult? Has something that was thought to have vanished from this world reappeared? The Chu clan head slowly stroked his long beard, remaining silent for a moment before speaking in a mocking tone. Are you scared now? Bitch Lai Don tilted his head, thinking to himself, they're not the leaders. With that thought, he asked in a cold voice, can I take the Tian Song pill now? The Chu clan head clasped his hands behind his back, his voice becoming a little more pleased. You should have done that before you killed my subordinates. Bitch Lai Don simply gave a perfunctory reply. I'll just do the work of those I killed from now on. Won't that be enough? The Chu clan head tilted his head, asking with some confusion. Huh? Bitch Lai Don smirked, saying in a casual tone, wouldn't recommending a master like me to your superiors be very beneficial for your position? Hearing this, the Chu clan head frowned slightly, a look of displeasure in his eyes. You're too arrogant. Do we look that easy to bully? Bitch Lai Don tilted his head, a smile still playing on his lips, and said, otherwise, this scene wouldn't have happened, would it? Alright, let's be frank with each other. At this point, he suddenly paused, slowly uttering each word. I am certain that. One of Bitch Lai Don's eyebrows rose high. His mouth curled into a smirk, his expression smug. If you want to kill me, you will lose 2/3 of your subordinates here. On the other hand, if I go crazy and decide to only kill an old man like you, there's no guarantee for your old life either. The Chu clan head didn't answer, silently contemplating. Seeing this, Bitch Lai Don spread his arms and said in an obvious tone, and suppose I'm beaten to death, how would you report that to your superiors? That some madman wandered into the meeting, killed most of your subordinates, and is now dead? The Chu clan head's face immediately darkened, his whole body freezing. After a moment, the old man reminded him in a low voice, take the Tian Song pill. Bitch Lai Don maintained his smug expression and didn't reply further. I know. He opened his mouth, bringing the pill to it. At the same time, he thought to himself, the no-regret demonic spirit pill has no effect on someone like me, who is immune to all poisons. The foundation of the no-regret demonic spirit pill is poison, so of course, I won't even get half a cycle of internal energy. The Chu clan head stood still, then suddenly said, take the other 2 pills as well. Bitch Lai Don's eyes widened, his expression somewhat doubtful. Are you serious? What's the reason for such goodwill towards me? He said this out loud, but in his heart, he understood clearly. Is the old man intentionally trying to leave me with only 1 short year to live? The Chu clan head, in the distance, still looked calm and even adopted a generous tone. Since things have come to this, let's you and I walk this path together. Bitch Lai Don went along with it, accepting comfortably. Don't you regret this? With that, he swallowed all 2 pills in front of the Chu clan head's eyes. Seeing this, the old man smirked knowingly. In the distance, Bitch Lai Don frowned, swallowing the pills with some difficulty. Only then did the Chu clan head reveal, there's poison in the spirit pills, so don't even think about trying anything funny. Unexpectedly, Bitch Lai Don replied nonchalantly, I know. The Chu clan head's expression was a bit stunned, that I'm not kidding. Bitch Lai Don turned back and raised an eyebrow, saying without much surprise, I had a vague idea, because there's no reason for you to hand out something this good without some kind of arrangement. The Chu clan head nodded, then turned to leave. You've got some brains. Follow me. A horse-drawn carriage clattered along a dirt road, passing through dense groves of trees. Bitch Lai Don sat in the carriage, blindfolded, with his hands tied behind his back. The Chu clan head sat opposite him and initiated the conversation. The Jianghu calls you a great hero, right? The nameless great hero. Bitch Lai Don showed no fear as he replied, that's true, but I personally don't like the term great hero at all. Hearing this, the Chu clan head asked curiously, what? Bitch Lai Don bowed his head and sighed. I feel like I'm being ordered around by others, made to do things that they themselves can't do. I've always hated being taken advantage of. The Chu clan head crossed his arms, unable to hold back his curiosity. Didn't you even warn the heavenly heavenly blade sect that day? Bitch Lai Don casually explained. Everyone was looking at me with gratitude at the time, so I just spoke loudly. In reality, that Slaughterer and I had a personal grudge. This time, the Chu clan head fell silent, contemplating something. After a moment, he let out an emotional remark. Oh, you're a fake great hero. Bitch Lai Don feigned displeasure. Don't say it so bluntly. It's heartbreaking to hear. The Chu clan head let out a sneer, ending the conversation. The carriage continued on, carrying the two of them down the road ahead. The road was lined with dense trees, and in the distance were overlapping high mountain ranges. A while later, in Zhengzhou, the noise from outside caught Bitch Lai Don's attention. As he was looking around, he heard the Chu clan head, who had already stepped down, call out, "Get down." Bitch Lai Don frowned, silently calculating in his mind. Their footsteps followed closely as they walked slowly on the wooden floor. The Chu clan head walked slowly in front. The surrounding atmosphere gradually quieted, and the old man's presence became strangely ethereal. Bitch Lai Don lowered his head to feel it, a blue energy spreading throughout the space. He thought to himself, "Are we going down to basement?" A loud noise sounded, and the Chu clan head, who had been silent for a long time, whispered an instruction. "Follow me." The two walked in single file, taking slow steps through a long corridor. Bitch Lai Don sensed something with his ears. He suddenly paused for a moment. Through the door, the silhouettes of a few people gathering could be seen. Bitch Lai Don passed by quietly, his guard raised. Masters. There are 8 masters on the level of Tam Hong. Suddenly, he sensed the Chu clan head turning in a different direction. Quickly following, Bitch Lai Don was suddenly stunned by a realization. In front of him was still a long corridor filled with blue energy, but it seemed to be mixed with a dense black energy. Walking behind, Bitch Lai Don immediately became suspicious, a colossal amount of primal energy that I've never encountered before. Sensing the energy spreading, he couldn't help but speculate. If that entity is a person, it's definitely a formidable expert. Along the way, black energy continuously radiated from both sides of the corridor. Bitch Lai Don, with his hands clasped behind his back, continued his train of thought. The room on the opposite side also has a very strange primal energy. This primal energy felt more strange than powerful. Thinking this, he pressed his lips together, a look of confusion on his face. What in the world are these people? The Chu clan head suddenly stopped and said, "We're here." Immediately, Bitch Lai Don pulled down his blindfold. Before him was a large cellar, simply furnished. In the distance, a person was sitting and reading a book. Seeing the person's silhouette slowly turn, Bitch Lai Don immediately showed a look of disbelief. What the hell is this? Primekan sinsa an spacial aura. At all. Ma Lin Nan turned with an indifferent expression and asked directly, "I heard you took all 3 no regret demonic spirit pills." Bitch Lai Don immediately put on a look of disbelief, repeating loudly, "No regret demonic spirit pills?" Outwardly he acted like this, but inwardly he was a little surprised. What is this? He's talking about the fake pills. Ma Lin Nan paid him no mind, continuing in a faint voice, "Your life now only has 1 year left." Hearing this, Bitch Lai Don's eyes widened, his mouth agape. With that, he lowered his head and slowly turned the pages of his book, explaining with little concern, "Taking 1 no regret demonic spirit pill leaves you with 7 years. 2 pills is 3 years, and 3 pills leaves only 1 year." At this point, Ma Lin Nan glanced over at Bitch Lai Don. "That means you took 3 pills, but you only have 1 year of life left." Bitch Lai Don turned in shock and loudly reconfirmed, "Is this true?" The Chu clan head, with his hands behind his back, calmly replied, "That's right." Hearing this, he gritted his teeth in anger. Bitch Lai Don's face darkened, his eyes wide, his mouth open as he emphasized each word. "I will definitely kill you, old man, before I die." The Chu clan head flinched and backed away, his body frozen by the threat. Ma Lin Nan was silent for a long moment, then suddenly said, "But I have a way to cure it." Bitch Lai Don immediately turned to him. "Really?" Ma Lin Nan's eyes darkened, his sharp gaze sweeping over him. "Of course. Do you want to live?" Bitch Lai Don seemed very impatient as he yelled loudly, "Is that even a question?" "Of course." As if he had gotten what he wanted, the corner of Ma Lin Nan's mouth secretly curled up. In contrast, Bitch Lai Don couldn't help but curse inwardly, an old fox. Looking at Ma Lin Nan's sanctimonious appearance, he thought to himself, he's being direct about the no-regret demonic spirit pill, but has deliberately hidden one thing. There is no antidote for this type of poison. At this thought, Bitch Lai Don's expression grew even more somber. He frowned, his eyes cold. If such a thing existed, the entire Jianghu would have been in the demonic cult's hands long ago. Bitch Lai Don frowned, his cold pupils staring straight ahead as he made a decision in his heart. Alright, he looked at Ma Lin Nan, who was standing with his body angled, and thought, "I'll do as you wish. I'll stay here and find out how you obtain the no-regret demonic spirit pill, and who is behind you." With that thought, Bitch Lai Don raised his voice and asked, "What must I do for you to reveal the cure?" Ma Lin Nan looked at him and replied coolly, "Just do as you're told." He frowned, his expression aggressive as he said, "Before that, I have one thing to say. I have a principle. I only kill villains. If you make me kill innocent people, I'd rather die." Ma Lin Nan turned away, ignoring him and continuing to flip through the book in his hand. "Unfortunately, I kill everyone, whether they are villains or not. However, among those you must kill, there are many villains." Bitch Lai Don didn't continue this discussion and instead narrowed his eyes to ask about something else. "It seems you're the one in charge here. May I know your name?" Ma Lin Nan glanced at him. "People call me Ma Lin Nan." As soon as this name was uttered, the expression on Bitch Lai Don's face turned dark with shock. The image of Ma Bong appeared in his mind, and he thought with suspicion, why is the successor of Ma Bong here? A long landscape painting hung on the wall, and opposite it, a person was silently admiring it. The scarred man clasped his hands behind his back, looking down expressionlessly at the painting on the wall. That Hao stepped up behind him and said, "The nameless great hero has killed the slaughterer." The scarred man asked doubtfully, "The slaughterer? What's with this nameless great hero?" That Hao replied, "He uses a type of martial art that this subordinate has never seen before." The scarred man said without turning around, "What does he compare to you?" That Hao said respectfully, "This subordinate is not confident in defeating him." The scarred man tilted his head, glanced at her, and then asked again, "What if you joined forces with K Man Nuong?" That Hao answered immediately. Man Nuong also said that it's hard to say. The scarred man turned around and pulled out the chair behind a long table. "So you don't know who he is at all? He just fell from the sky and killed the slaughterer." That Hao affirmed, "Yes." The scar man sighed and adjusted his lapels. The Jianghu has been very quiet lately. He opened his eyes, a smile on his lips as he said, "It's time to break that silence." Just then, the door to the room was pushed open by another person. A masked man entered, stood in the distance, and bowed, saying, "Subordinate has confirmed the location of the nameless great hero." The scarred man looked up and asked, "Where?" An image of Bitch Lai Don and Ma Lin Nan appeared as the masked man continued. "Ni Hao has contacted us to report that the nameless great hero has approached Ma Lin Nan." The scarred man's index finger rose and tapped on the table. "That Hao, the man who killed the slaughterer, the one who should have died by your hand, has fallen into Ni Hao's hands. There's no way this is a coincidence." He narrowed his eyes, smiled, and gave an order. "This man is very unusual. That Hao, you go over there and assess the situation. Take K-Man Nuong and Tai Lang with you." That Hao asked doubtfully, "Tai Lang as well?" The scarred man waved his hand. "I heard he's very strong. If we're going to eliminate him, we must do it properly." That Hao asked no more questions, only saying, "If I interfere in this matter, I'm afraid Ni Hao will not like it." The scarred man lowered his eyes, the corners of his lips rising as he said, "I know, but just ignore him. You only need to trust in yourself." That Hao bowed, clasping her hands in reply. This subordinate understands. Ma Lin Nan walked in front, followed by Bitch Lai Don, who kept a distance of a few steps. He tilted his head slightly, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Ma Lin Nan, who was walking ahead, suddenly smiled and said, "I'm gonna find some ingredients." Bitch Lai Don asked doubtfully, "Ingredients?" Ma Lin Nan's lips curved. "I'll let you see for yourself what that thing is." Bitch Lai Don fell silent, pursing his lips as he watched the man's grim back. He glanced at the dark passage ahead and thought, "This is the same corridor I walked with Chu Dao. Try. It's just like it was then. I can sense the auras of 8 masters." Bitch Lai Don's face suddenly grew serious, and he frowned, looking up and staring straight ahead. He looked over to where Ma Lin Nan was standing and said to himself, "This is the place that was emitting that strange primal energy earlier. He's letting me come to a place like this." Ni Hao stood straight behind the doorframe. His gaze suddenly shifted, coldly glancing at Bitch Lai Don. Ni Hao said, "Outsiders are forbidden here." Bitch Lai Don silently sized him up, thinking cold, indifferent eyes. He looked at Ni Hao and Ma Lin Nan standing next to each other, thinking deeply. His eyes are exactly like that house. Is he Ma Lin Nan's confidant? If so, does that mean every successor is assigned someone like this? The corner of Ma Lin Nan's lips suddenly curved up, and he sighed. It can't be helped. Bitch Lai Don lowered his eyes and said indifferently, "Then there's nothing to be done." Ni Hao leaned back from behind the door, making way for Ma Lin Nan to enter. Ma Lin Nan spoke as he stepped inside. "All right, just explore slowly. If you knew everything in one day, what fun would that be?" Bitch Lai Don crossed his arms, not showing his attitude as he replied, "That's true." The other two spoke, then entered the room and slammed the door shut, leaving Bitch Lai Don standing alone. Outside, he looked up, his expression suddenly changing to a grim, sharp one. Elsewhere, in an area of closely connected buildings, the Chu clan head's voice sounded next to Bitch Lai Don. "You will stay at this inn and await orders." He turned his head, looking at the old man sitting in the carriage and asked, "How long must I wait?" The Chu clan head replied, "Until we give you an order." Bitch Lai Don stood facing the carriage, his arms crossed, and said, "All right, but I won't be hanging around the inn. I hate being confined, so if there's a task, deliver it in the early morning." The Chu clan had expressed no opinion. "If that's possible, I will do so." Bitch Lai Don glanced at the old man, and, "Another thing, don't put me under surveillance. If anyone is lurking around here, I won't hesitate to kill them." The Chu clan head turned and leaned back against the carriage, not looking at him as he retorted, "You think you're still as high and mighty as before, don't you? You're not that important. If you want to leave, feel free." The carriage door was shut. The old man said, "Then go live out your last year gloriously with that bit of internal energy." Bitch Lai Don stood by the roadside with his arms crossed, watching the carriage drive away. He pursed his lips, his cold expression following it for a long time. Bitch Lai Don turned and stepped into the building under the eaves. His voice echoed from the highest room of the building. "I'm going to sleep, so don't wake me up." The other person replied, "This lowly one understands." Bitch Lai Don clasped his hands behind his back, standing with his eyes lowered before the wide open window. He closed his eyes tightly, concentrating on sensing his surroundings. The N01 is watching. "I'm definitely not being followed." Bitch Lai Don then jumped out from inside the room through the wide open window. He leaped up forcefully, his toes landing lightly on a rooftop. Bitch Lai Don stood on the roof, observing from above the direction of Manor Lord Chu's carriage convoy that had just departed. He frowned around, thinking to himself, that old man isn't returning to the manor from before. Having grasped the situation, Bitch Lydone, who was standing on the roof, suddenly vanished in a flash. Manor Lord Chu's carriage stopped in front of a large villa in a desolate, sparsely populated area. The old man got out of the carriage, waved at a servant standing guard at the gate, and went inside. Bitch Lydone, hiding behind a large tree trunk, peeked out to observe. He had confirmed Chu Daoji's residence. Now I must find the place where I met Ma Lin Nan. He leaned back and once again vanished without a trace behind the bushes. The man in green, standing by the carriage, asked in surprise, "No destination?" Bitch Lydone replied, "Not exactly. It's just been a long time since I've been there, so I don't remember. You just need to follow my directions, and I'll pay you for your services until midnight tonight." The man in green closed his eyes and pondered. That's fine then. The carriage was driven off, heading straight onto a trail in the middle of the forest. Bitch Lydone sat inside the carriage, silently closing his eyes. He frowned slightly, using his ability to sense the space inside the carriage. An image of the carriage appeared in Bitch Lydone's mind. He thought, when we went there, even though I was blindfolded, I could tell by feel that the carriage kept going straight ahead from within the forest toward a pass between two high mountains. Time passed quickly, and the afternoon sky was covered in the golden hue of sunset. Bitch Lydone sat on a large tree branch, his gaze fixed on a large villa below. Found it. He pressed his lips together, his expression serious as he observed the inside of the courtyard. Even though I got lost a few times, I'm sure this is the place. He probably didn't expect me to find my way back here after being released. Bitch Lydone knelt on one knee on the branch, thinking steadily. First, let's see who comes to this place. As night fell, the house in the back was lit up with lamps one by one. Bitch Lydone raised his eyes, looking over in the direction of the sound that had just been made. He looked down, and a group of people walking out from inside came into view. Bitch Lydone mentally counted them and thought to himself, it's the 8 people I sensed when I passed through the corridor. The corners of his lips curled up in amusement. So they're the martial artists guarding Ma Lin Nan. At the crack of dawn, in the highest room of the house where Bitch Lydone was staying, he sat cross-legged on a small bed with his hands on his thighs, his eyes shut tight in meditation. Bitch Lydone's brows furrowed deeply as he thought. Ma Lin Nan has approached the West Frost sect and the East Sword clan. Before his eyes, the image of Ma Lin Nan gradually appeared, smiling and saying something to a man in green, followed by another person dressed in red. The image suddenly changed, turning into the side profile of Ma Din Tuesday. Those are the 2 sects representing Hunan. Although Ma Din Tu has gone down to Shandong to raise the issue with Duong Chubang, Ma Lin Nan is associating with these 2. Ma Lin Nan smiled, the blurry figures of the man in green and the man in red behind him. Bitch Lydone thought pensively. It's unclear how he managed to win over 2 sects that are in a competitive relationship. But just from this, it's clear that Ma Lin Nan, he is a much more cunning person than Ma Din Tu. A knock on the door sounded, pulling Bitch Lydone from his thoughts. He opened his eyes and looked over. He walked to the door and pushed it open, silently pressing his lips together as he looked at Ma Lin Nan standing. Outside, Ma Lin Nan smiled and asked, "Did I wake you?" Bitch Lydone lowered his eyes and replied, "Not at all. I wasn't even asleep yet." After speaking, he muttered to himself, "I hadn't even slept yet because I was busy tracking Ma Lin Nan. So there's no need to pretend that he woke me up." Ma Lin Nan's lips curled. "Had I known, I would have come to see you sooner." Bitch Lydone said bluntly, "Since it's already like this, isn't it pointless to say such things?" Ma Lin Nan lowered his eyes and laughed out loud. "You're as amusing as ever." After joking, he pointed to the room and asked, "Are you going to make me stand outside forever?" Bitch Lydone moved aside and said without much enthusiasm, "Please come in." Ma Lin Nan entered, clasped his hands behind his back, looked at the tea table, and asked, "Couldn't sleep, so you had a few cups?" Bitch Lydone closed the door. "I don't like to drink alone." Ma Lin Nan closed his eyes, his back to him, and said, "So that's how it is." Bitch Lydone leaned to the side, looking at Ma Lin Nan, who was standing before the open window, and said, "I've remembered the name Ma Lin Nan. Among the 6 successors to the Alliance leader, there's a very promising one named Ma Lin Nan." He asked, "That person is you?" Ma Lin Nan looked at the scenery outside the window, the corners of his lips curling up slightly. He laughed and replied, "That's right, I'm the person you're referring to. Also, it's not 6 successors. Now, there are only 5. Bitch Lydone suddenly said, "You are from a prestigious Orthodox sect." Ma Lin Nan, without turning back, understood his unspoken doubt and voiced it. "Why am I doing shady things in a basement?" Bitch Lydone frowned and replied, "That's right." Ma Lin Nan didn't answer directly, but said evasively, "Aren't you the same?" The line between a hero and a villain is as thin as paper. He turned his head to look at Bitch Lydone and asked with a smile, "We're both the same, aren't we?" Bitch Lydone frowned, his lips pressed together in silence. He raised his hand, reflexively catching the thin scroll thrown by him. Bitch Lydone looked down at the thin scroll in his hand. Ma Lin Nan explained, "This is 1,000 tales. Since you can't sleep today, go to a brothel and have some fun." Bitch Lydone thought coldly. What an unexpected gesture of goodwill. He raised his eyes to look at Ma Lin Nan's back, saying to himself, "It seems this monster's tail is deliberately wagging in front of me." Bitch Lydone put the banknote away and asked with a smile, "But why are you so good to me? I've killed many of your subordinates." Ma Lin Nan also curled his lips and replied, "Didn't you take 3 of those precious no-regret demon spirit pills? Although it's cheaper than other spirit pills with the same effect, it takes a lot of time and money to make 1 no-regret demon spirit pill." Bitch Lydone asked doubtfully, "Is that the only reason?" Ma Lin Nan answered nonchalantly, "Of course not. I have other reasons too." Bitch Lydone asked, "What are they?" Ma Lin Nan looked outside, the corners of his lips raised as he said, "Every time I look at you, I feel that there is a fateful connection between people." Bitch Bitch Lydone lowered his eyes and said impatiently, a fateful connection between two men? How can it be such cheesy stuff? Hearing him say that, the corners of Ma Lin Nan's mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. He said, from the very first time I met you, I had a feeling that you and I have a deep fateful connection, or simply put, I find you very agreeable. Bitch Lydone silently raised his eyes to stare at his back. He smiled and thought, if it weren't me but a man in his 20s or 30s, he might have actually believed his words just now. Bitch Lydone looked at Ma Lin Nan's side profile and thought again, giving a whole 1,000 tales and saying such words full of goodwill, how many people wouldn't be moved? He put one hand on his hip, patted his chest with the other, and spoke up. In any case, thank you very much. I will definitely put this money to good use. The next day, Bitch Lydone's voice echoed from the highest room. You want me to kill someone named Fanhan Fat? Manor Lord Chu affirmed. That's right. Fanhan Fat's face was dark, highlighting the glaring red color and his chilling smile. Manor Lord Chu said slowly. Fanhan Fat was originally a very famous martial monk in Hunan province. After suffering from cultivation deviation and falling into the lustful monk's plight, he became a lecherous thief who specialized in robbing temple donations and fleeing. The old man stood before Bitch Lydone's bed and said, after that, he continuously kidnapped women. In the process of hunting him down, many martial artists lost their lives. Bitch Lydone asked doubtfully, is he an enemy of Ma Lin Nan? Manor Lord Chu replied, then why? Hearing that, Bitch Lydone became even more suspicious and asked again, then why? Manor Lord Chu answered, for several years, we have been unable to catch him. But luckily, this time I have found his whereabouts. Bitch Lydone frowned, thinking in astonishment, what the hell is this? He's not an enemy, yet they're telling me to eliminate him. Manor Lord Chu stroked his beard and said, you just need to capture him, hand him over to the Martial Arts Alliance, and collect the reward. Bitch Lydone raised his voice and shouted, what you people trying to do now? Startled by his sudden shout, Manor Lord Chu looked over. What are we doing? Just catching a villain. Bitch Lydone said angrily, don't you pull that damn trick on me. Manor Lord Chu, also irritated, shouted back loudly, watch your mouth. Bitch Lydone gritted his teeth, his furious gaze following the old man. After a moment, he pressed his lips together and let out a long breath. Fine, why do you want to kill him? Manor Lord Chu replied, I already told you just now, didn't I? He's a villain. Bitch Lydone bluntly retorted, no matter how villainous, he can't be as bad as you, old man. Manor Lord Chu didn't get angry, only saying, to be honest, I also don't understand young Master Ma's intentions. The old man said, I don't understand why the young master shows you such goodwill. Bitch Lydone looked up at the old man, saying to himself, it seems Chu Daoji doesn't understand anything either and is just following Ma Lin Nan's orders. Thinking this, he immediately stood up from the bed, bowed his head, and agreed. All right, I'll go and capture that man first. Manor Lord Chu replied, it's good that you think that way. Bitch Lydone's lips curled as he said to himself, I'll go along with you for now. I don't want to lose this tale just yet. Red flames were lit, rising through the tree branches in the forest. A bonfire was lit in the middle of a clearing, surrounded by blood-soaked corpses lying in disarray. Fresh blood dripped from Fanhan Fat's hand onto the monk's staff he was holding. Fanhan Fat's eyes were bloodshot, panting incessantly as he approached the two surviving women who were clinging to each other. He raised his hand, his pupils never leaving the two as he licked the blood from the back of his hand. The two girls were terrified by his perverted expression, their faces pale as they trembled uncontrollably. Bitch Lydone spoke up. You truly are someone who deserves to die. Fanhan Fat froze, tilting his head to glance behind him. Bitch Lydone stopped opposite him. It seems I no longer need to be bothered about not knowing the reason why I have to deal with you. Fanhan Fat looked at him and asked doubtfully, you must know who I am and came here intentionally. Who are you? He laughed, looking around as he asked, and how many of you did they send to catch me? Bitch Lydone raised his hand and replied nonchalantly, of course it's just me. You don't need an ox cleaver to kill a chicken. Fanhan Fat was amused by his words, baring his teeth as he asked, you came alone? He raised the hand holding the staff to block in front of him and said contemptuously, in the past, many fools like you who didn't know their place have come, and I had to personally send them all to the Buddhist paradise. Bitch Lydone frowned, the smile on his face vanishing, and did not reply. The staff in Fanhan Fat's hand suddenly shot forward. Bitch Lydone leaned and jumped to the side to dodge. Fanhan Fat leaned in, gripping his staff tightly as he relentlessly thrusted at him. Bitch Lydone bent low, nimbly dodging the attacks of the staff with each move. The sky turned completely dark, and in the center of the forest, a cloud of white smoke suddenly exploded. Bitch Lydone leaped up, thick layers of dust and smoke behind him. Fanhan Fat lunged, brutally swinging the staff in his hand straight ahead. Bitch Lydone tilted his head to avoid it, his cold pupils staring straight ahead. He took advantage of the moment before he could retract his arm to close in on Fanhan Fat. Bitch Lydone raised his hand, concentrating power into his fist. Fanhan Fat was startled and tried to pull back his arm and retreat. Bitch Lydone directly swung his fist, punching him hard in the chest. Fanhan Fat bent over, his pupils wide and white. Bitch Lydone's face was cold, his icy pupils staring at him. The wine jug was lifted, slowly tilting to pour into the small bowl on the table. Bitch Lydone picked up the bowl of wine with a somber face, thinking pensively. After Fanhan Fat, Ma Lin Nan, through Chu Daoji, wants me to kill another person. His brows furrowed suddenly. The assassin Tong Bak. Tong Bak was draped in a tattered cloak. Holding a sword in one hand, he revealed a crazed smile. He thought, he's a man who lives in Hunan and works as an assassin. As long as there's money, the villain Tong Bak is not only willing to kill ordinary people who don't know martial arts. Bitch Lydone raised his hand, lifted the bowl, and took a sip. He doesn't even spare children. And my mission is the same as last time, to kill Tong Bak and hand him over to the Martial Arts Alliance. He lowered his hand, placing the empty bowl down. Bitch Lai Don wiped his chin with the back of his hand, thinking to himself, I killed the butcher Kim Hoa, a symbol of power. Then I successfully assassinated Fan Han Fat. Just like that, my reputation as a hero has quickly spread throughout the martial world. He tilted his head, glancing to the side. It's strangely as if someone deliberately spread this rumor. At a table not far from him, two men were drinking and talking enthusiastically. After Alliance leader Tien passed away, there was no one in the martial world worthy of the title of hero, but finally, that person has appeared. Bitch Lai Don lowered his head, listening with a somber face as the next table continued. Exactly. Heroes always appear in times of chaos. Only then can the world be at peace. He suddenly looked up, suspiciously eyeing the figure who had just approached. Ma Lin Nan sat down in the empty chair opposite him and asked with a smile, how does it feel to become a hero? He looked up straight at Bitch Lai Don and asked, how is it? Bitch Lai Don didn't answer right away, thinking pensively. Ma Lin Nan, why is he showing me such goodwill? He raised his hand and replied slowly. I was very surprised. What's the big deal about killing those guys? Do you know that I received a reward from the Martial Arts Alliance? Ma Lin Nan's lips curled as he let out a soft breath. He crossed his arms and said mockingly, I know, but what difference does it make? You'll use it for something useful, won't you? Bitch Lai Don was momentarily stunned. He lowered his eyes, the corners of his lips also curling up. How ridiculous. Ma Lin Nan said with a smile. Since ancient times, the times create the hero. Even if you kill the same person, if it's not at the right time, no one will know about you. Bitch Lai Don picked up the wine bowl again. Becoming a hero and earning money is great, but in the end, why did you give me this sweet deal? Ma Lin Nan said nonchalantly. It's just a small gift. Bitch Lai Don asked doubtfully. A gift? Ma Lin Nan narrowed his eyes and replied with a bright smile. I'm just giving a commemorative gift for a newly made friend. Bitch Lai Don pressed his lips together, looking up to stare at him without a word. At night, at the Tone Chow Martial Arts Academy, a phantom-like figure leaped over, leaving only a cloud of dust before disappearing. A black shadow flashed, lightly gliding past the guards on patrol. The black shadow leaped up, moving across the rooftops where the guards couldn't see. Bitch Lai Don, dressed in black and wearing a face mask, sped across the rooftops, thinking. It took me several days to find out that to get information, the place I need to go is the Tone Chow Martial Arts Academy. In the past few days, it's not just you who have been keeping tabs on me. He stopped at a room, carefully hiding behind a partition wall. Bitch Lai Don peeked out and said to himself, Chu Daoji lives in the Tone Chow Martial Arts Academy. In his Hunan province, he also has several anjia and prefects. After monitoring Chu Daoji for several days, two guards, speaking in low voices, unknowingly walked past him. Bitch Lai Don leaned out, silently watching the direction they left. He frowned, thinking, I found out that this place is considered a central base. Bitch Lai Don stepped lightly toward the room, only to hear Ma Lin Nan's voice coming from inside. What is Nameless doing? He froze, saying to himself, It's Ma Lin Nan. Inside the room, Manor Lord Chu said, He's the same as always, going to brothels to eat, drink, and wander around here and there. Ma Lin Nan raised the corners of his lips and said, Find a way to make him even more famous. Manor Lord Chu raised his hand, walked up behind him doubtfully, and asked, Young master, can you let this subordinate know? Why must you be so good to him? Ma Lin Nan, with his back to the old man, didn't answer, but asked in return, Are you very curious? Manor Lord Chu replied, Yes, this subordinate truly wants to know the reason. Ma Lin Nan turned his head to look at the old man. In that case, your question was wrong from the start. I'm not being good to him at all. Manor Lord Chu froze, his eyes wide with disbelief. He regained his composure, still unclear on a point, and asked, Young master, you gave him information, even the locations of those with bounties on their heads, allowing him to gain both fame and fortune. If that's not goodwill, what is? Ma Lin Nan leaned forward and asked the old man with a smile, Do you know what's going to happen in this very Tone Chow next month? Manor Lord Chu bowed his head and thought, Next month? Isn't it the Golden Grand Banquet? Ma Lin Nan said, That's right. Bitch Lai Don, standing outside the door, heard them and thought deeply. The Golden Grand Banquet is a major event held once a year, an occasion that gathers major merchants from all over the Central Plains. Not just merchants, but the Martial Arts Alliance leader and key personnel of the Martial Arts Alliance. Even prestigious families of the martial world will attend. Ma Lin then spoke again. At that time, my older brother will also come. Bitch Lai Don was shocked, a name popping into his mind, Ma That Quan. Manor Lord Chu replied hesitantly. Of course that's right. Ma Lin Nan lowered his head, a sinister smile on his face, as he said, I will send Nameless there to assassinate my older brother. He looked up, stroking his chin as he continued. The martial world is now calling Nameless a great hero. What would happen if such a person killed my older brother? Manor Lord Chu asked in alarm. But can he kill Ma That Quan? Ma Lin Nan replied dismissively. Even if the assassination fails, it doesn't matter. Manor Lord Chu was confused. Why not? The corners of Ma Lin Nan's lips rose in a calculating smile. The great hero Nameless wants to kill Ma That Quan. That's the key point. He imagined Bitch Lai Don's back and said sinisterly, The world will think like this. Why would a righteous hero want to kill Ma That Quan? Manor Lord Chu replied softly and then asked, But what if he gets caught and reveals everything? Ma Lin Nan laughed. You don't need to worry about that. old man. He will definitely die on the day he goes to assassinate Ma. That Quan. Ma Lin then glanced at the old man. Because we have that thing. Therefore, we must make our hero more famous, more powerful. Manor Lord Chu replied. This subordinate understands. Bitch Lai Don, standing outside the door, thought doubtfully. Is this the reason? Before his eyes, the tall figure of Ma, that Quan appeared, almost obscuring Ma Lin Nan. He thought to himself, every martial artist in the world knows that Ma Lin Nan's most formidable rival among the successors is Ma that Quan. He is famous within the Heavenly Blade sect, and moreover, most people in the martial world predict that he will be the successor to the Martial Arts Alliance leader. The figure of Ma Lin Nan standing behind suddenly magnified, and he said pensively, but if he dies, Ma Lin Nan will become the most promising candidate. Bitch Lai Don's face darkened, and he glanced into the room, wondering, but what is that thing Ma Lin Nan mentioned? The next morning, at the small building where Bitch Lai Don was staying, he said bluntly, I need some money. Manor Lord Chu paused, asking doubtfully, why so suddenly? Bitch Lai Don replied nonchalantly, I just suddenly want to become a true hero. Manor Lord Chu said doubtfully, what does that have to do with money? Bitch Lai Don crossed his arms, lowered his head, and replied, why wouldn't it be related? A hero needs a good sword and a suit of buffalo leather armor, right? Manor Lord Chu retorted, that doesn't sound like it has anything to do with being a hero. It just sounds like you want to make a score. So how much do you need? Bitch Lai Don said lightly, just 20,000 taels. Manor Lord Chu couldn't help but raise his voice and shout. What? He said angrily, you crazy bastard. Do you think 20,000 taels are just leaves on a tree that you can say it's so easily? Bitch Lai Don glanced at the old man. What does that have to do with you? You just need to relay my words to the young master. That's all. After speaking, he turned around and pulled the door open. Manor Lord Chu froze, silently watching the door being slammed shut. His face darkened, and several distinct lines appeared on his forehead. Bitch Lai Don stood behind the door, thinking, this is something that could change the position of the future alliance leader. He opened his eyes, his lips curling as he muttered, Ma Lin Nan probably won't refuse. I must take full advantage of that damn goodwill of his. Early the next morning, Bitch Lai Don held a large bag in his hand, followed by Manor Lord Chu's voice. Here are 20,000 taels. He was momentarily stunned, looking at the bag of silver in his hand, thinking in surprise. I thought I'd get 10,000 taels at most. I didn't expect to receive the full 20,000. Manor Lord Chu narrowed his eyes, silently recalling. Ma Lin Nan had smiled and agreed without hesitation. I'll give it to him. Manor Lord Chu had asked in surprise. What? He had said loudly. Absolutely not. This amount is too large. If we give him anything, a few thousand taels would be more than enough. Ma Lin Nan had said calmly. The bigger the investment, the higher the return. I'll pay. Manor Lord Chu snapped out of his memory, frowning and muttering regretfully. I've never even received that much money, yet this damn bastard. He said no more and turned to leave quickly. Bitch Lai Don held the silver, silently watching the tightly closed door. He lowered his eyes, the corners of his lips turning up in a happy smirk. The next day, people came out of their houses, going about their various jobs in the town. In an empty courtyard piled with wooden bricks, next to a half-built brick wall, Bitch Lai Don stood in a deserted corner, looking over at the group of busy people. He crossed his arms, his expression serious as he stared at them. Ma Lin Nan's voice suddenly sounded beside him. I heard the Martial Arts Alliance leader will give a speech at this place. Bitch Lai Don asked with a smile. The Martial Arts Alliance leader? Shouldn't the young master call him father? Ma Lin Nan also smiled and replied. One must separate public and private matters. He tilted his head to look at him. You look well today. Bitch Lai Don crossed his arms and replied nonchalantly. When you have money, of course you're well. He remembered the heavy bag of silver he had received the day before and said cheerfully. Thank you for the 20,000 taels, young master. To be honest, I was just asking. I didn't expect you to actually give it. He curled his lip, glancing at him. I'm starting to see young Master Ma in a new light. Ma Lin Nan lowered his eyes, a smirk playing on his lips as he said, thank you for understanding my heart. Bitch Lai Don asked, may I ask a question? Ma Lin Nan replied, immediately, be my guest. An image surfaced in Bitch Lai Don's mind of the first day Ma Lin Nan had brought him here, when he had leaned in to speak to someone in the room. He asked curiously, who was in that room? The corners of Ma Lin Nan's lips curved. He lowered his gaze and asked in return, you must be very curious, aren't you? Bitch Lai Don raised a hand, turning to look at him and said, isn't that only natural? You personally led me there, yet you were stopped. Ma Lin Nan fell silent, his expression darkening. Bitch Lai Don pressed on. So who exactly was inside that room? Ma Lin Nan lowered his eyes, not answering him. Why do you ask about that? Bitch Lai Don observed his expression and said to himself, look at his unhappy face. It seems I've struck a nerve. Thinking this, he deliberately feigned ignorance in his reply to Ma Lin Nan. I was just wondering if that person is young Master Ma's superior or subordinate. Ma Lin Nan replied in a cold voice. A subordinate. He pressed his lips together and let out a long breath, then deliberately asked, a subordinate can stop their master? It seems young Master Ma's tastes are rather peculiar to be fond of someone so arrogant. Ma Lin Nan's brows furrowed, his face dark as he turned to look at him. Bitch Lai Don leaned and walked around behind him. Well then, if it's too difficult, let's just drop it. There's still many other things in the world to see. He waved his hand and said, in that case, I'll take my leave, young Master Ma. Ma Lin Nan gritted his teeth, his face grim as he watched Bitch Lai Don's departing back. Feeling his sharp, cold gaze from behind, Bitch Lai Don curled his lip and thought, if you think you're the only one who can manipulate others, you're sorely mistaken. He just kept walking forward, calmly murmuring to himself, you may be a reader, but I'm someone who's had to deal with all sorts of old foxes. A hand covered in thick, green veins swung out, punching hard into the wall. The hard wall was repeatedly struck by brutal punches. The person swung his hand again, landing another heavy punch on the wall. The man's upper body was bare, revealing eerie blue and purple veins. He leaned against the wall, bent over and panting nonstop. His eyes were wide open, his mouth agape, but he had stopped drooling. He hunched over, facing the wall and gasping for breath, his back to the tightly shut door behind him. A voice came from outside the door, still so full of energy, even now. This old man has a good feeling about this time. The head of the Chu family held a bowl of incense, his brows tightly furrowed as he said, "Just endure until this incense stick burns out, and it will be a success." Ma Lin then gritted his teeth, biting his fingernails as he retorted, "No." The head of the Chu family was startled, turning his head to look at the door from which a miserable scream was coming. He looked worriedly inside and shouted, "Try to endure it." The head of the Chu family looked at the man whose entire body was covered in green veins and yelled, just a little more." The man clutched his head in pain, repeatedly slamming it against the hard wall. Seeing this, the head of the Chu family urgently shouted, "Hang in there, you bastard. I told you to hold on for just a little longer." The man covered in green veins fell backward, coughing up a large mouthful of blood. A large pool of blood shot out, splattering all over the surface of the door in front of the head of the Chu family. He lowered his eyes, letting out a heavy sigh. Ma Lin Nan stood behind him, both of them silently watching the closed door. The head of the Chu family bowed his head, his mouth agape as he looked at the nearly burnt-out incense stick in the bowl. He tilted his head, sweating as he carefully looked behind him. Ma Lin Nan's face was dark as he gritted his teeth, his eyes narrowing as he stared coldly. Ahead, the head of the Chu family looked at his back and said in a trembling voice, "In any case, today was better than usual." Ma Lin Nan didn't reply, silently and quickly walking out. Ni Hao stood straight, coldly guarding the door. Ma Lin Nan glared and said, "Open the door." Ni Hao didn't move from his spot, replying stiffly, "You cannot do this, sir." Ma Lin Nan lost his patience and yelled, "I said, open the door." Ni Hao blocked the door, refusing to back down. My apologies, young Master Ma. Didn't we promise each other that if the one inside does not permit it, we would not force our way in? Ma Lin Nan stepped forward again, getting in his face and shouting, "Move." Ni Hao said in a cold voice, "If you continue like this subordinate will report everything to the upper manor." Ma Lin Nan glared angrily and retorted, "The upper manor? What do you take me for? Am I a subordinate at your feet or something?" A faint sound suddenly came from inside the room Ni Hao was guarding, drawing the attention of both men. Ni Hao tilted his head, his face grim as he silently glanced at the tightly shut door. Ma Lin Nan pressed his lips together, looking over with suspicion. His face dark, he asked, "Who in the world is in that room?" Ni Hao bowed his head, his eyes lowered as he remained silent. Ma Lin Nan couldn't contain his anger and clenched his jaw tightly. He raised his voice and cursed loudly, "You damn bastards. If you didn't trust me, you shouldn't have dragged me into this from the beginning." The head of the Chu family stood not far from the two. He silently listened to Ma Lin Nan vent his anger. "And if you're going to drag me in, you should trust me to the very end, shouldn't you?" He looked at him with a grim face, saying to himself, "A person who never reveals his true emotions can get this furious." After listening, Ni Hao still said indifferently, "Young master, please go back." Ma Lin Nan was still fuming as he cursed, "You arrogant bastard. I'll definitely make you regret this." He gritted his teeth, his eyes filled with furious fire as he recalled Bitch Lai Don's words. It seems young Master Ma's tastes are rather peculiar. To be fond of someone so arrogant. Ma Lin Nan cursed inwardly. Damn it. Night fell at the small building where Bitch Lai Don was staying. He opened the door to his room, looking outside with suspicion. Bitch Lai Don looked at Ma Lin Nan, standing outside the door with a cold face, and asked, so sudden, "What brings you here, young master?" Ma Lin Nan composed his expression, smiling as usual as he asked him, "Care for a drink?" Bitch Lai Don's lips parted, momentarily stunned. He lowered his eyes, let out a breath, and replied, "Perfect timing. I was just wanting a few drinks to drown my sorrows." Inside the room, Ma Lin Nan proactively lifted the jug to pour wine into. A bowl. Bitch Lai Don sat opposite him and said, "There's something I'm curious about." Ma Lin Nan asked, "What is it?" He dropped his playful demeanor and asked seriously, "Is this something you're doing on your own, young master, or is it the Alliance?" Leader's idea. Ma Lin Nan continued to pour the wine. He gave a faint smile and asked in return, "What do you think?" Bitch Lai Don picked up the wine bowl, smirking as he said, "I think it seems the young master is doing this secretly." Ma Lin Nan asked in surprise, "Why would you think that?" Bitch Lai Don raised his eyes and said with a smile, "After all, he's the great martial arts Alliance leader. Why would he get involved in such shady business?" Ma Lin Nan lowered his eyes, the corners of his lips curling up slightly again. Maybe so, maybe not. He raised his brows again, saying sharply, "In the end, you still won't tell me the truth." Bitch Lai Don smiled, raising the wine bowl in his hand. "You said it yourself, didn't you? The more you know, the faster you die." As he spoke, he tilted his head back and drank it all. Let's not let our bond end so quickly just because of curiosity. Bitch Lai Don also raised his bowl, thinking to himself, "A person who plans to use me and then kill me can say such words." He put the bowl down, using the back of his hand to wipe away the wine that trickled down his chin. If you look at it from a certain angle, he's quite admirable. Bitch Lai Don suddenly took out a small whetstone from his clothes, placed it on the table, and said, "Take this." Ma Lin then asked doubtfully, Isn't this a whetstone?" Bitch Lai Don withdrew his hand, looking at the whetstone on the table, and replied, "It's a gift." Ma Lin then hesitated and asked again, "A gift?" He placed his hands on his lap, let out a breath, and said with a smile, "Although this can't compare to the goodwill you've shown me, young master, I still want to repay you in some small way. It would be better to buy something grand, but I didn't know what to get." Bitch Lai Don bent over and stood up. "It's getting late today, I'll go rest first." He turned around and said again to Ma Lin Nan, who was still sitting behind him, "Please continue drinking." Ma Lin Nan remained seated, silently picking up the whetstone bitch Lai Don had left to examine it. Ma Lin Nan leaned to the side, revealing Ni Hao standing behind him, and said with a smile, "You two should greet each other." Bitch Lai Don spread his arms wide, looking at Ni Hao and said, "I don't know if you know this, but I don't have a proper name. Just call me Vo Dan." Ni Hao showed no emotion, replying indifferently, "I don't have a name either." Ma Lin Nan tilted his head to look at him and asked, "But there's still a word used to call you." Ni Hao was silent. He closed his eyes and said indifferently, "Everyone calls me Ni Hao." Hearing this, bitch Lai Don thought with suspicion, "Ni Hao?" Just as I predicted, he's in the same organization as that Hao. He smiled and asked, "As Ni Hao, you must be very skilled, right? Second only to not Hao." Ni Hao lowered his eyes, his expression cold as he did not reply. Seeing this, Ma Lin Nan took the initiative to speak up. "This brother will become a part of us from now on. Let him inside for a look around." Ni Hao raised his eyes, silently staring at him for a long moment. Bitch Lai Don thoughtfully looked at the two of them, thinking to himself, the relationship between these two just needs a spark to explode. The corners of his lips curled up. This is exactly what I wanted. After a moment of silence, Ni Hao finally compromised. As he walked past Bitch Lai Don, he spoke, "Follow me." He led the way, walking straight to a room with a tightly shut door. Ni Hao stopped in front of the door and said without turning back, "This is the place. I will escort young Master Ma and great hero Vo Dan inside for a moment." The door, which had always been tightly shut, was pushed open a crack. He leaned to the side of the door. "You two go in." Bitch Lai Don frowned, looking curiously into the room, and said to himself, "Now, what in the world is in there?" He didn't hesitate, following Ma Lin Nan's footsteps into the room. As soon as he saw the situation inside, Bitch Lai Don couldn't help but freeze. What entered his sight were jars of various sizes arranged on a large wooden shelf in the middle of the room. Bitch Lai Don pressed his lips together tightly and thought, the medicinal fragrance is so strong. He raised his eyes, looking at the cloth bags hanging from above. I can smell the scent of poisons and spiritual medicines mixed together. Another corner of the room had a row of cabinets with many small drawers. In the corner was a large, messily arranged bookshelf. On the floor were also piles of untidily stacked books. Bitch Lai Don's gaze swept over every nook and cranny of the room before stopping on a large vase filled with tubes. The strange stream of vital energy I felt before came from this thing. Ma Lin Nan, standing in front, suddenly smiled and spoke, "Seeing that someone has come, shouldn't you at least show your face and say hello?" Lin Yinting held a stack of papers, her back turned to him as she said, "There's no one over there." Ma Lin Nan ignored the sarcasm in her words and just pointed at Bitch Lai Don, saying, "I brought someone with me." Lin Yinting, as before, replied without care. Birds of a feather flocked together. Ma Lin Nan sighed. The experiment failed again. Lin Yinting's face was grim, and she didn't speak, only pointing her pristine white cane towards the two of them. A long moment later, she put down the stack of papers in her hand and replied, "I know." Lin Yinting bent her back slightly, lowering her eyes as she turned around. She opened her eyes, her sharp pupils glancing over in this direction. Bitch Lai Don looked at her, thinking warily, a master. A master whose cultivation level is much, much higher than Ma Lin Nan's and Chu Daoqi's. Lin Yinting crossed her arms, silently taking a step and walking past Ma Lin Nan. She stopped in front of him, leaning in slightly. Bitch Lai Don's eyes widened, and he froze on the spot in a daze. Lin Yinting closed her eyes, moving close to Bitch Lai Don's shoulder and sniffing lightly. She didn't linger for long, quickly backing away to maintain a distance. Lin Yinting tucked her bangs behind her ear and asked, "Is this your new servant? Smells nice." Ma Lin Nan smiled and retorted, "No, this is my friend." Lin Yinting looked at him in astonishment. "Got a friend? You have friends." She turned to look at Bitch Lai Don, saying bluntly, "Staying close to someone like that, you'll die an early death." Bitch Lai Don lowered his eyes and replied with a smile, "Lately, I've been able to feel that quite strongly." Lin Yinting looked at the two of them curiously again. "But why are you two together?" Bitch Lai Don raised his hands in a gesture of innocence that I was caught in a trap. Lin Yinting frowned slightly and averted her gaze, saying with a bitter smile, "A trap? That sounds scary, especially a trap from that person." But she quickly composed her expression. She looked up at him and said probingly, "But there's something strange about you." Bitch Lai Don pressed his lips together, looking straight into her eyes without answering. Ma Lin Nan, who had been silent, suddenly burst out laughing. He raised a hand towards him, coming to his rescue by saying, "He's a friend that I had to use a trap to keep." Lin Yinting tilted her head, her long, slender fingers resting lightly in front of her mouth. Bitch Lai Don looked at a corner of the room and asked, "What is this place used for concocting?" Ma Lin Nan replied, "Alchemical pills." He explained softly, "It's a type of pill that helps the user become invincible and unparalleled, and it will also be the type of pill that can save your life." A flash of insight went through Bitch Lai Don's mind. He thought sharply, are they researching a pill that can eliminate the side effects of the no-regret demon spirit pill? As soon as this speculation emerged, Bitch Lai Don put his hands on his hips and raised his voice to ask, "You're lying to me. You said before that there was already a way to resolve this." Ma Lin Nan still answered him calmly, "Detoxification is a small matter. The use of this pill is far greater." His eyes curved as he said with a smile, "But we will definitely succeed in our research within a year." Ma Lin Nan tilted his head to look at Lin Yinting, seeking her support as he asked. "Right." She bowed her head, picking up a dark brown outer robe. "Because you two came here and got in the way, it will probably take an extra day." Ma Lin Nan ignored Lin Yinting, who was putting on her outer robe, and turned to say to Bitch Lai Don, "Don't worry, the pill will definitely be successfully refined within a year. Now do you understand why I let you see this place with your own eyes?" Bitch Lai Don frowned, his face face grim as he didn't answer. Ma Lin then smiled again. Trust me. Lin Yining walked up to him and asked, do you know how to drink? Bitch Lai Don replied, of course, but I don't like to drink alone. Lin Yining walked past him. Great, then have a few drinks with me. She walked to the door and said casually without turning back, we'll be drinking separately. So Ma Lin Nan, you can stop dreaming. Ma Lin Nan bowed his head. His eyes lowered as the corners of his lips lifted. The sky was now nearly dark, and a warm golden hue fell over the large building. A wine jug was lifted, steadily filling the small bowl placed on the table. Bitch Lai Don raised the wine bowl, tilted his head back, and drank it all in one go. Lin Yining moved her chopsticks to pick up some food. Drinking like that on an empty stomach will give you a stomachache. Bitch Lai Don put the empty bowl down and said if the young lady was concerned about her health, she shouldn't be cooped up in such a dark place. Lin Yining gave a faint smile and replied, it's work. I can't do anything about it. Bitch Lai Don smiled and asked, is there really nothing you can do about it, young lady? You could just close your eyes and go somewhere else, right? Lin Yining also looked up at him. Run away. She burst out laughing and said, it's fun just thinking about it. Bitch Lai Don paused, frowning as he looked at her for a long moment. He suddenly asked, what is your name, young lady? Lin Yining didn't answer him right away, but retorted, oh, you have the right to ask for other people's names? Bitch Lai Don closed his eyes and said emotionlessly, I'm already annoyed that I don't have a name, and now I'm not even allowed to know the name of the person in front of me. Lin Yining lowered her eyes, the corners of her lips curling up slightly. She spoke as she poured wine into a bowl. Lin Yinting. Bitch Lai Don's lips curled into a slight smile. He lifted the wine bowl on the table and said with a bright smile, a beautiful name. Come, a toast to this fate. Lin Yining looked up at him and smiled faintly. She raised her bowl, moving closer to gently touch it against his. They both tilted their heads back, decisively downing the bowl of wine. Bitch Lai Don placed the empty bowl back on the table. But what exactly are you researching? Young lady. Lin Yining picked up her chopsticks to get some food. Research on survival. He once again lifted the refilled wine bowl. See, Lin Yinting suddenly asked, how did you get to know young Master Ma? Bitch Lai Don answered, it was a coincidence. Lin Yinting rested her chin on her hand, full of interest, and said, I want to hear that story. Bitch Lai Don looked up and glanced at her. Then he lowered his eyes again, his lips curling as he let out a helpless sigh. Lin Yinting rested her chin on her hand, listening intently as Bitch Lai Don told a story. He gestured with his hands as he spoke, a smile unconsciously spreading across his lips. Lin Yinting lowered her eyes, the corners of her lips curling as she stared at him. The two of them talked and drank for a long time. They still hadn't stopped by the time night fell. At night, the entire large building was lit up one by one, brilliant against the darkness. Ni Hao walked beside Lin Yinting, strolling together on the quiet path. Lin Yinting lowered her eyes, her entire face filled with a gentle expression as her lips curled up. She suddenly composed her expression, looking up ahead. Ma Lin then stood with his hand behind his back, looking at the two of them. Did you two have fun? Lin Yinting replied nonchalantly. Not having a look at your face made the drink go down better. Ma Lin then also smiled and asked in return, is that so? I guess I contributed to the fun then. How fortunate. Lin Yinting frowned, pressing her lips together without a word. She bowed her head slightly and walked past Ma Lin Nan. Before Lin Yinting stepped through the door, his face suddenly turned grim as he spoke. I'm gonna give him the antidote you're researching. Lin Yinting was silent, her mind flashing back to the image of a figure covered in eerie green veins, spitting out a mouthful of blood. The smile on her lips gradually faded, but she still said nothing. Ma Lin Nan spoke again. You're smart. You won't believe that an antidote can be developed in just a few days. So just tell him this is the first dose for a long-term treatment. After speaking, he didn't wait for Lin Yinting's reply and started to walk away. Lin Yinting frowned, her lips pressed together unwillingly as she stood silently in place. For a long time. The next morning, Kwang Dao stood in the empty courtyard in front of the house, swinging his arm to practice his swordsmanship. He raised his hand, and the sword in his hand carried cold gusts of sword wind as it sliced through the air. The sharp sword path cut through the air, creating invisible sword lines and a cloud of dust. His face was covered in sweat, which trickled from his cheek down to his chin, and his brows were also tightly furrowed. Tong Hoalan walked out from inside the house, stopping at the doorstep to watch Kwang Dao practice his sword. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes fixed on him intently. Tong Hoalan observed Kwang Dao from a distance for a moment, then thought to herself, until now, I've known him as a servant of the Bitch Tea Sword sect, Bitch Lai Don's personal attendant. Kwang Dao, who was practicing his sword, suddenly turned his head. As soon as he saw Tong Hoalan standing not far away, he stopped his movements. He tilted his head to look at her, calling out in surprise, young lady. Tong Hoalan smiled and replied, yes, it's me. Kwang Dao hurried over, sheathed his sword, and bowed, asking excitedly, how did you come to be here, young lady? Tong Hoalan covered her chest and bowed her head slightly. Seeing his exaggerated reaction, she couldn't help but chuckle. I had some business nearby, so I dropped by on the way. Kwang Dao hastily stepped back, raising his hand and saying awkwardly, why would the young lady bow to a lowly person like me? Tong Hoalan stood up straight. Lowly? Don't say that. Kwang Dao was stunned, his eyes wide as he asked again, but what business brings you here, young lady? Tong Hoalan smiled. My father sent me to run some errands in Wuhan. I heard you all were at this inn, so I dropped by for a bit. Kwang Dao frowned slightly and said, the young master is not here right now. Tong Hoa Lan gave a forced smile, unable to hide her disappointment. Ah, I see. It's all right, I was just dropping by. She pressed her lips together, thinking sadly, I really should have given some notice. Kwang Dao looked up and saw her sadness, feeling awkward and not knowing what to do. He suddenly raised his voice and called out, young lady. Tong Hoa Lan asked with suspicion, what is it? Kwang Dao's eyes widened as he said sincerely, please don't give up on my young master. Tong Hoa Lan was stunned, her cheeks flushing involuntarily. After saying that, Kwang Dao pressed his lips together, looking at her with both excitement and anticipation. Tong Hoa Lan closed her eyes, a small smile reappearing on her lips. She looked up and replied with a bright smile. All right, but you'll have to help me out a lot, okay? Kwang Dao quickly patted his chest. Don't worry, young lady. This humble one will always be on your side. Tong Hoa Lan tilted her head, a gentle smile on her lips. In the evening, in the room where Bitch Lai Don was staying, Ma Lin Nan smiled, pouring wine into a bowl as he asked, how was yesterday? Bitch Lai Don picked up the wine bowl. What are you talking about? He curled his lip, closed his eyes, and sighed. It seems she's quite taken with you. Bitch Lai Don asked with suspicion, why would young Master Ma think that? Ma Lin Nan raised his bowl and replied with a laugh. It was all written on her face. Bitch Lai Don retorted, that's not true. He looked up straight at him, smiling as he guessed. Could it be that you're jealous? Ma Lin Nan was so amused he laughed out loud. How could that be? I'm not one to covet a friend's woman. Bitch Lai Don asked doubtfully, a friend? Ma Lin Nan affirmed, a friend. Bitch Lai Don narrowed his eyes slightly, staring at him coldly. He raised his hand, bringing the wine bowl in front of Ma Lin. Nyan. He looked up, the corners of his lips curling up again. Then he decisively raised the wine bowl on the table and clinked it against the bowl Bitch Lai Don was holding steady in the air. They both tilted their heads back, downing the wine in one go. Ma Lin Nan's expression darkened, and he pressed his lips together as he placed the empty bowl on the table. Bitch Lai Don looked at his expression for a moment, then asked, you look terrible, young master. Did something happen? Ma Lin Nan replied, nonchalantly, it's nothing. He didn't let it go at that, instead smiling as he probed, nothing? Tell me about it. Ma Lin Nan pressed his lips together, hesitating to speak. A moment later, he bowed his head and said, when the golden grand banquet takes place, my father and older brother will come here. At that time, I will have to meet him. Bitch Lai Don crossed his arms and asked doubtfully, eldest brother? He explained through gritted teeth, it's Ma that Quan. Bitch Lai Don raised his voice. Great hero Ma, the potential successor, right? Ma Lin Nan waved his hand, scolding irritably. Great hero my ass. As if a switch had been flipped, he continued, without stopping, that he's the kind of person you can't attach the two words great hero to. His inner self is completely different from the facade people see. Ma Lin Nan's expression darkened with anger. He has done all sorts of dirty tricks behind our father's back, from violating women to murder. Bitch Lai Don crossed his arms, tilted his head back, and commented with his eyes shut tight. In this martial arts world, you really can't trust anyone. Ma Lin Nan said nothing, just tilted his head back again and drained another bowl of wine. Bitch Lai Don also remained silent, crossing his arms and staring at him. Ma Lin Nan looked up, his face grim, and said, do you know why I'm doing all this? I want to take back the position of successor from his hands. Bitch Lai Don asked, but how? He gritted his teeth, his entire face darkening. Bitch Lai Don suddenly understood, his pupils narrowing sharply as, oh, you want to kill your own eldest brother. Ma Lin Nan pressed his lips together, not answering. Bitch Lai Don lowered his arms, picked up the wine jug, and filled the bowl. He raised the bowl of wine, lifting it slightly, and said, I will help you do it. Ma Lin Nan looked up, his eyes wide with astonishment as he stared at him. What did you say? Bitch Lai Don wiped his mouth, smiled, and asked, young Master Ma's already said it, haven't you? He revealed a sharp smile and added, we are bound by fate. He was slightly startled, shouting in a flash of panic. Ma Lin Nan shook his head, waving his hand, and said, it's no good, you'll die. Bitch Lai Don replied nonchalantly, I'm gonna die in a year anyway. Ma Lin Nan frowned angrily, that I'm researching the antidote for you right now, aren't I? He raised his hand, leisurely picking up food from the table with his chopsticks as he spoke slowly. The problem is, who's to say an antidote for this kind of demonic pill even exists in this world? Do you think I'm that foolish? Bitch Lai Don lowered his eyes, a smile playing on his lips. If it really existed, the research would have been completed long ago. Ma Lin Nan raised his voice. Even so, he raised a hand, smiling to stop his words that don't stop me, or I might change my mind. Bitch Lai Don's voice softened. This is the first time in my life I've genuinely stood up for someone. Ma Lin Nan's brows furrowed in alarm. You? Bitch Lai Don raised the wine jug again and poured it into a bowl. Thanks to you, young master, I gotta become a great hero, have money, meet beautiful women, and make friends. He chuckled, his eyes tinged with sadness as he said, one should always leave while the applause is still. Ringing. Ma Lin Nan froze, his eyes wide with alarm as he stared at him. Bitch Lai Don put down the empty bowl and said instead, I want to ask a favor of you, young Master Ma. Ma Lin Nan asked hurriedly, what is it? He lowered his eyes, saying thoughtfully, I will kill Ma, that Quan on the last day of the Golden Grand Banquet. Bitch Lai Don's lips curled into a bright smile as he asked, this is the last festival of my life. Shouldn't I enjoy it a little? He frowned, tears welling up in his eyes, and trembled, the M.Y. friend. Bitch Bitch Lydone pressed his lips together, thinking coldly. I can feel the joy and the smile behind these fake tears. He glanced at Ma Lin Nan, who had his head bowed in sadness, and said to himself, because he's enjoying the thrill of being able to psychologically manipulate someone. Where Ma Lin Nan couldn't see, the corners of Bitch Lydone's lips curled up slightly. He raised his bowl, and as he drained it with Ma Lin Nan, he thought mockingly, but these tears of yours might just become real tears of sorrow. A round censer was placed in the middle of the room, its rim studded with white bamboo tubes connected to other small jars. Lam Yin Tin spoke up, saying to the stunned Bitch Lydone, they have made a childish decision. He walked over, looking at Lam Yin Tin, who was sitting behind the edge of a table with her back to him. You must have heard about it. Lam Yin Tin closed her eyes and sighed. What a pity, I just found a drinking buddy. Bitch Lydone spread his arms, smiling with a frown as he asked, is there no chance for me to survive? Lam Yin Tin answered, none. Bitch Lydone bowed his head, his expression darkening, and forced a smile. That's a real pity then. Before I die, there's something I'm curious to ask. What exactly is your organization? Lam Yin Tin did not turn to look at him. I can't tell you. Bitch Lydone didn't give up asking. I'm about to die, and you're still so tight-lipped? He bowed his head, his brows furrowed as he thought to himself, the crucial moment has come. Please, reveal just a little something. Lam Yin Tin said coolly, you're gonna die soon anyway, so what's the point in knowing? Bitch Lydone lowered his eyes, that you're so cold. She was unmoved by him, replying coldly. The martial arts world has always been a cold-blooded and heartless place. Lam Yin Tin stood up, holding a yellow piece of paper as she walked to a cabinet. You don't know how to judge people, you don't know how to listen, and you're even soft-hearted. She briefly turned her head to glance at him. You deserve to die. Bitch Lydone crossed his arms, standing beside her, and asked, even so, do you have to say such heartless things? Lam Yin Tin averted her gaze, replying as she took something from a drawer. What's heartless about it? It's the truth. Bitch Lydone closed his eyes, sighing with a mocking laugh. What can I do? I was born this way. Hearing him say that, Lam Yin Tin couldn't help but frown and look over at him. Bitch Lydone didn't press her further, instead raising his eyes to look outside and asking, then can you answer this for me? What's in the room opposite this one? I can feel a very powerful primal energy emanating from it. Lam Yin Tin replied, in there's a very scary person. Bitch Lydone asked back doubtfully, a scary person? He stared at the tightly shut door, thinking pensively, is that terrifying primal energy really coming from person? It's on par with me when I was the alliance leader, but there's something much more insane about it. His brows furrowed tightly, and his expression turned incredibly cold. He said to himself, who on earth is that person? Bitch Lydone held a loosely clenched fist before his mouth, and suddenly asked, do you have a sweetheart? Lam Yin Tin glanced at him in surprise. Why do you ask that? Bitch Lydone was also surprised, asking doubtfully, hasn't young Master Ma told you? Lam Yin Tin was confused about what. He lowered his eyes and chuckled. As expected, he's jealous. He thinks that you. Before he could finish his sentence, a voice suddenly called from outside, that it's me. I'm coming in. Bitch Lydone fell silent, and he and Lam Yin Tin looked over. The corners of his eyes widened in surprise as he stared at the person who had just entered. Ni Hao led the way, followed by that Hao. He said a new person has come down from the organization, so we came to say hello. That Hao clasped her hands. She bowed respectfully and said, I am that Hao. Lam Yin Tin's eyes curved into a smile, but it's a pleasure to meet you. That Hao straightened up, nodding in reply. Yes, I look forward to your guidance. Ni Hao spoke up, let's go outside. That Hao once again clasped her hands towards the two remaining people in the room. Yes, then I shall take my leave. Bitch Lydone stood silently to one side, not saying a word from beginning to end as he watched the two leave the room. He pressed his lips together, his face grim as he thought, I didn't expect that Hao to appear here. A memory of her appearance flashed in his mind. He said to himself, when I killed Du Sat too, she was also in the crowd. It's clear she had a mission related to Kim Hoa. The scene changes, the frame now somewhat dark. At that time, Bitch Lydone's eyes narrowed slightly. Standing in a corner looking at Ma Lin Nan, he thought, but because I ruined that mission, she now has to meet with Ma Lin Nan. This organization has clearly investigated me. He narrowed his eyes, his entire face sinking into a sharp expression, and surely, that Hao came to this place because of me. Lam Yin Tin, holding a book to her chest, looked at him and asked, what are you thinking about that's making you space out like that? Her lips curved, and without waiting for his answer, she took the initiative to guess. You're thinking about the woman from just now, aren't you? Bitch Lydone asked with a forced laugh. How did you know? Lam Yin Tin chuckled that a man's heart is easy to guess. Bitch Lydone didn't ask further, but circled back to the original question. But let's continue our earlier conversation. Lam Yin Tin asked doubtfully, what conversation? Bitch Lydone smiled and repeated the half-finished sentence from before. It seems young Master Ma didn't pass on the message too. You because he was jealous. Lam Yin Tin raised her eyes, asking in surprise, jealous? Bitch Lydone smiled brightly. About the fact that I like you. Lam Yin Tin's eyes were wide with astonishment as she stared at him for a long moment. She raised a hand to cover her mouth, laughing loudly as she said, is this a case of why not try it before you die? Bitch Lydone shrugged. Why does liking someone have to be so malicious? Lam Yin Tin bowed her head, her smile fading. Stop joking. Bitch Lydone looked straight into her eyes with complete seriousness. I'm not joking. She turned and stepped closer to him. Lam Yin Tin's hands were still holding the book, and with a curve on her lips, she drew near to Bitch Lydone. He froze, his pupils dilating as he looked down at Lam Yen Tin, who had stepped right in front of him. She tilted her head up, her eyes closing seductively, but the words that came out were as cold as ice. All the men who have ever liked me have died. Bitch Lai Don laughed, completely unfazed. Then that's perfect, since I'm a man who's about to die. Lam Yen Tin didn't reply, but suddenly stepped forward and lightly touched the corner of his lips. Bitch Lai Don's eyes widened in disbelief, his whole body stiffening. Lam Yen Tin bowed her head, lightly touching his chest, and said, I felt sorry for you, so I'll let you have a little taste. She turned around, saying coldly, now go. After speaking, she decisively turned and walked deeper into the room. Bitch Lai Don pressed his lips together, his face grim as he watched her leave. See you later. Elsewhere, in a downtown area with densely packed houses, people from all over were coming and going, bustling on the streets. Each person carried their own belongings, strolling along the road, no two alike. Groups of people in mismatched attire all hurried forward with their heads down. The wide street was crowded with streams of people coming and going. Beside the street, a crowd gathered, all facing a magnificent building in the distance. Bitch Lai Don, wearing a straw hat, bowed his head and blended into the crowd moving forward. He pressed his lips together, his sharp gaze showing from under the brim of his hat as he looked coldly ahead. On the stage, a brown-haired man in a red coat emerged from inside with his hands clasped. He curled his lips, smiling at the crowd below. The brown-haired man spread his arms, raising his voice loud enough for the whole crowd to hear. Distinguished guests who have traveled far from all over the Central Plains to be here. I declare the #1 festival in the Central Plains, the most brilliant banquet in the world. The Golden Grand Banquet officially begins. Dazzling fireworks were shot into the sky, as if in response to his words. The brown-haired man said loudly, this is a place for us merchants to meet and interact. Throughout the duration of the Grand Banquet, feel free to puff out your chests and speak loudly, because the main characters of this Grand Banquet are you, our esteemed guests. The crowd raised their fists, shouting in unison in response to his words. The brown-haired man waited for the crowd to quiet down before speaking again. And now, I would like to introduce the greatest esteemed guests from the martial arts world who have come to attend today's festival. Please welcome the center of this martial arts world, the Martial Arts Alliance leader. The Martial Arts Alliance leader raised his arm, smiling and waving at the crowd below. Bitch Lai Don, hidden in the crowd, frowned deeply, coldly observing the group standing up high. Behind him was the white-haired and bearded Tien Ha Tran. On the stage, the two brothers Ma Lin Nan and Ma That Quan stood side by side. Ma That Quan curled his lips, smiling as he looked straight ahead. In contrast, the expression on Ma Lin Nan's face, standing behind him, was dark and cold. Bitch Lai Don looked up, his eyes narrowing sharply as he followed their every move. The evening twilight gradually fell, casting its light on a horse-drawn carriage parked at the edge of a deserted forest. Ma Lin Nan asked with a grim face, how did it go? Were you able to assassinate him? Bitch Lai Don's expression darkened as he thought pensively. Beside Ma That Quan were an old strategist and Tam Hao from the mysterious organization. The appearances of the old strategist and Tam Hao, whom he had seen earlier, gradually formed in his mind. Bitch Lai Don fell into deep thought, and before his eyes, a group of men in straw hats with fierce, unapproachable looks appeared. There were also the 7 heavenly dragon swords protecting the sect master of the Tien Dao sect. Bitch Lai Don broke from his train of thought, rubbing his chin as he replied, it's not easy. The aura of those known as the 7 heavenly dragon swords is anything but ordinary. Ma Lin Nan understood, saying with a cold face, they're all top masters, but the bigger problem lies with Ma That Quan. He recalled Ma That Quan's smiling face and added, he is even stronger than all of the 7 heavenly dragon swords combined. Bitch Lai Don asked thoughtfully Tam Hao, the one standing next to him, if I were to carry out the assassination, how would he react? Ma Lin Nan recalled Tam Hao's cold appearance and said, he would just stand and watch. Tam Hao is there not to protect, but to supervise. Bitch Lai Don bowed his head. Yes, oh, he's different from Ni Hao. Ma Lin Nan crossed his arms and replied, that's right. So Ni Hao would step in if anyone dared to touch Ma Lin Nan. Thinking this, he looked up at him and said, we need to find out when he separates from the 7 heavenly dragon swords. Bitch Lai Don frowned. Not only that, besides the people we can see, there might be hidden masters around. Ma Lin Nan looked straight into his eyes and replied, I know. On the surface, Bitch Lai Don appeared normal, but inwardly, the corners of his lips had curled into a wide smile. You must be desperate for me to go assassinate Ma That Quan, but I have no intention of doing so. These words are just to sway you. Bitch Lai Don suddenly asked, young Master Ma, how is that matter I asked you about before? The one about me being able to move freely in the underground manner to meet Lam Yen Tin. Ma Lin Nan replied immediately, I've already arranged it. I can do that. He gave a serious warning, but you absolutely must not go near the room on the opposite side. Bitch Lai Don waved his hand, saying with a smile, of course, I'm only interested in her. He curled his lips, thinking to himself, now that I have the freedom to enter and exit that manner. And I, Bitch Lai Don looked at the tightly shut door before him. We'll definitely check that room. Lam Yen Tin frowned, you're so annoying. Bitch Lai Don shrugged. Men were born to annoy women. She said sharply, hey, if you came here because of what happened that day, then your thinking is too simple and foolish. That kiss meant nothing. Bitch Lai Don pressed his lips together, freezing for a moment upon hearing those words. Lam Yen Tin frowned, staring at him. He quickly regained his composure, placing a palm over his chest and saying with a smile, there are too many cunning people in this world, so there have to be a few simple and foolish people like me to balance things out. Lam Yen Tin glanced at Bitch Lai Don, who was putting on act. The fact that you can say such things means you're not that that foolish. Bitch Lai Don spread his arms wide and burst into loud laughter. Lam Yin Tin pressed her forehead, letting out a frustrated sigh. Bitch Lai Don, who was laughing mockingly, suddenly stopped, his gaze drawn to an object in the corner of the room. He averted his eyes, silently looking at some pieces of wood and scraps of paper in the corner. Bitch Lai Don smiled and asked, "Is there anything I can help you with? Feel free to order me around." Lam Yin Tin bowed her head to flip through a book, replying coolly, "There's nothing, so just stay put and be quiet." Bitch Lai Don frowned, saying seriously, "Alright, I'll be as well-behaved as a newborn." Lam Yin Tin said bluntly, "Shouldn't children be cute?" He clasped his hands behind his back and gave a strained smile. He paused, and when she wasn't looking, he glanced towards the corner of the room. Bitch Lai Don focused, staring at a piece of paper loosely attached to a wooden board. Nam Huin Escort Agency. He averted his gaze, looking again at the busy Lam Yin Tin, and thought, this is the first time I've heard this name. They certainly wouldn't entrust the delivery of these escorted goods to an unrelated agency. The next day, the streets were still bustling and noisy with people passing by. They carried goods they had just bought, and some carried heavy, cumbersome items as they strolled past the stalls. Kong Chu San leaned over, smiling, and saying something to a stall owner. Bitch Lai Don's voice suddenly echoed in his head. "It's me." He, wearing a straw hat, stood in the crowd not far from Kong Chu San and said, "Mobilize all the information networks we have and find out about the Nam Huin Escort Agency for me as quickly as possible." Bitch Lai Don started walking, silently passing by him. They have a formidable force backing them, so be extremely careful when investigating. He pressed his lips together. His expression was serious as he looked ahead. He thought to himself, there are only 4 days left in the festival. After receiving the order, Kong Chu San went back to chatting normally with the stall owner beside him. The bustling crowd passed by ceaselessly, obscuring Bitch Lai Don's back and front. In almost an instant, he had completely disappeared into the crowd. That evening, at the building where Bitch Lai Don was staying, he pulled open the door to his room, unguardedly looking straight at the corner of a straw hat that was visible. Bitch Lai Don's lips parted, staring in astonishment at the person standing outside. Lam Yin Tin lifted the brim of her hat, holding a wine jug in her other hand with a smile. Bitch Lai Don's eyes were wide open, looking at her with a mixture of surprise and shock, without blinking. Lam Yin Tin walked in, took off her hat, and placed it in the wine jug on the table. "Surprised, aren't you?" Bitch Lai Don chuckled. "I never thought there'd be a day you'd knock on my door. It's always been me coming to find you." Lam Yin Tin sat down nonchalantly, picking up the wine jug, and said, "You know it too, I'm quite proactive. Care for a drink?" Bitch Lai Don sat down opposite her, smiling as he watched her lean forward and drink straight from the jug. "Of course." Lam Yin Tin wiped her lips, lowered her eyes, and pushed the wine jug towards him. Bitch Lai Don's lips curved, and he sighed with a slight frown. He relented, lifting the jug and tilting his head back for a large gulp. Lam Yin Tin rested her chin on her hand, her eyes filled with a sad, pensive look. Ma Lin Nan's words echoed in her mind. "Tomorrow, I will give him that thing to drink." Bitch Lai Don suddenly asked, "It seems like something is bothering you." Lam Yin Tin broke from her memories, silently raising her eyes to look at him. Bitch Lai Don wiped his chin with the back of his hand, looking back at her with a puzzled expression. Lam Yin Tin bowed her head, lowering her eyes to hide the emotions within. She reached out, taking the wine jug he offered, and "Oh, if you're done drinking, give it to me." Lam Yin Tin held the jug, tilted her head back, and took several large gulps in a row. She reached out, handing the jug back to him as she said, "It's not too late yet." Bitch Lai Don asked doubtfully, "What do you mean?" Lam Yin Tin's brows furrowed in anguish. "Run away." Bitch Lai Don fell silent, his face grim as he looked up straight at her. He didn't answer, just silently lifted the wine jug. He thought to himself, I can feel that to say these words, she must have had a great internal struggle. Even at this moment, she must have made a huge resolution. Lam Yin Tin lowered her eyes. Even if you only have 1 year left, live it happily. That's enough time to get your life in order. Bitch Lai Don suddenly said no. She was momentarily alarmed, her eyes widening in shock. Bitch Lai Don chuckled. I don't want to become someone who breaks a promise just to live for another year. Lam Yin Tin shook her head, her brows furrowed in worry as she snapped. You really? Bitch Lai Don said nothing, just looked straight in her eyes and smiled. Lam Yin Tin froze, the word she was about to say getting stuck on her lips. She bowed her head, letting out a resigned sigh. Lam Yin Tin reached out and snatched the wine jug from his hand. I have to have another drink for the most foolish person I've ever met in my life. After saying that, she tilted her head back, recklessly raising the wine jug to her lips and swallowing nonstop. Bitch Lai Don frowned and asked, why are you saying these things to me? Lam Yin Tin wiped her mouth, not answering him, but asking back, then why do you like me? He curled his lips, replying nonchalantly, I just do. Lam Yin Tin picked up her straw hat, and as she stooped to stand up, she said, me too. She put her hat back on, turned toward the door. I just want to let you know. Lam Yin Tin touched the door, pausing slightly to say, tomorrow. She slowly pulled the door open, saying without turning back, I will give you a spirit pill that will be useful for your mission. After speaking, she decisively closed the door and left, leaving Bitch Lai Don sitting alone at the table, staring at the closed door. Bitch Lai Don dropped his disguise, smiling as he thought, it's probably a type of pill with terrible side effects, because if the assassination fails, I must die. The night outside gradually fell, and the light in Bitch Lai Don's room also slowly dimmed.